Here comes Walker and firing a shot from the top of the left circle, banging off the leg pads of Logan Thompson. And now as Beauvillier and Ovechkin will team up. And a puck behind the net. Binnington looking to play it, and he gave it away to Ovechkin. The puck centered up here for Chikrin to drive, and a puck that is in a score! And it's 900 goals for Alexander Ovechkin! The 900 Club has its first member. The odometer turns over and the bench empties, and Alex Ovechkin has done it. The first player in National Hockey League history to 900 goals.
There it was last night. John Walton on the call, heard on our sister station, 106.7 The Fan, home of your Washington Capitals. Early second period gave the Caps a 2-0 lead. And St. Louis Blues goalie Jordan Binnington took the puck out of the net and stuffed it into his pants. But they saw it, and they found it and said, sorry, you got to give that puck up. That was a slick move that old Binnington tried. Isn't he a Stanley Cup winning goaltender? Didn't the Blues beat the Bruins like in the finals
in 2019,
a few years ago?
the year after the Caps won? Yes.
Yeah, and he was their starting goaltender.
He
correct?
sure was. Yep.
Yeah, there you go. Alex Ovechkin, man, it just keeps coming. Third goal of the year here in Game 13, and really, in many ways, even more important than that, the Caps stopped a 4-game losing skid after starting the season on fire. They had lost 4 in a row. Good on Alex. I think that is the last momentous goal, unless he gets to 1,000, and I doubt that's going to happen.
Shocking, Kevin.
Yeah. I don't think that there's another one, right? Like there's not.
No,
I mean,
he's climbed the mountain.
Every goal,
exactly,
since he broke the record, is the new record.
Yep.
It's like Hank Aaron when he set the home runs record. Everyone after that was the new record. But yeah, man, he is something else. I'll tell you that.
That he is, baby.
He really is. Good morning, everybody. There's I just saw this story before we went on air. Really sad story. I don't know. There's no details on it. Marshawn Nealand, the Cowboys' second-year defensive end. He's the guy that blocked the punt on Monday night against the Cardinals and scored. He fell on it in the end zone. He passed away suddenly last night at the age of 24 years old. No, details on this sudden, passing. The Cowboys put out a statement. It is with extreme sadness that the Dallas Cowboys share that Marshawn Nealand tragically passed away this morning. Marshawn was a beloved teammate and member of our organization. Our thoughts and prayers regarding Marshawn are with his girlfriend Catalina and his family. 24 years old, no details. Nealand actually was a pretty good player for them this year. Second-year player, had a sack, had the, touchdown on the block punt. Wow. Like you said, it's like, when you see these stories, it's kind of, scary and morbid and all those things and sad, but it's like you go right to TMZ. Go right to TMZ to find out what happened. We don't have anything yet as to why this happened.
Nothing. I'm sure we'll get more details kind of drip fed throughout the morning, or if not the coming days, but nothing on it. Like Brian exclaimed about 5 minutes before the show, because Brian is a Cowboys fan. Yeah. So he immediately got the notification, and I went right to Twitter and nothing other than, condolences and a statement from his agent and the Cowboys. It's awful. Yeah,
very sad. Very sad. They've had a very rough year, for sure. And, the trade the other day for Quinnen Williams, I still don't get it. And I know some of you Cowboy fans are like, you're just such a hater. I'm like, okay, I'm not really. I used to be. I used to feel it a lot more, but your team has stunk forever, and we just had the only good season we've had in 33 years. And it's like, no, I just don't get, a team that isn't really going to make a playoff run at 3-5-1, especially with the schedule they have, giving up a first and a second for a great player. Don't get me wrong, Quinnen Williams is a great player, but if you were going to make that trade, Dallas, I was thinking about this, and we didn't talk about it yesterday. Why didn't they make it 3 weeks ago? When it could have been more impactful. Like, at least the Bengals realized Jake Browning doesn't give us any chance. And, they made a move like it. I'm not saying that they gave up the expense that the Cowboys did for Quinnen Williams, but the point is they acted in a timely manner so that if it turned out to be something that works, they could actually take advantage of it. And look, Flacco's not been the issue. They just can't stop anybody. Flacco's been phenomenal since they traded for him now, 3 weeks ago, a month ago? How many games has he played in? 3 or 4 at this point? If you're going to do that, why wait for the trade deadline? You don't have to wait for the trade deadline. That maybe the Jets weren't interested in dealing Quinnen Williams, Sauce Gardner 3 weeks ago. But if you're going to do that, you do that so that you can make something out of the current season. They're 3-5-1. And they still have the Eagles, the Chiefs, the Lions, the Chargers. They got to come here on Christmas Day. See what happens when that happens. Busy show today. Denton, end of this hour to talk some college football. Charch in his normal spot at 11:25. And I told you guys yesterday that I was having Steve Suter on the show. He's on my podcast every Wednesday, breaks down the previous game. He is excellent doing film analysis. I know that there are a lot of good people out there, but you guys seem to really like Steve, and so do I. I think he's doing a great job. And I made him aware of the Kurt Warner, film review. Warner, by the way, on social media yesterday really tried to make a point that, this is, the one game, and it last year, Jaden was so great. He knows he can do all of these things, etc. But Steve had a different take on Jaden's game Sunday night. But he also acknowledged that there were a few plays for sure where he could have pulled the trigger. So you'll hear some of that. Actually, I'm going to give you a bunch of it because he also talked about a couple of things on defense that I don't think anybody really picked up on that I thought was interesting. But this from Chick to open up the show. Chick writes, so Kurt Warner, your punt return guy, that's Steve Suter. Steve Suter, one of the all-time greatest punt returners in the history of college football. Yada, yada, yada. Where do we go from here? As you always say, Sheehan, enough about blame. What are the solutions, please? Yeah, I would say, Chick, why do we have to discuss solutions now? They still have 8 games left in this season. No, I'm not about to give you the playoff scenarios, although I will just mention that if you kind of take a look at the standings, the NFC's number 7 seed right now, the Detroit Lions at 5-3. If somehow Washington pulled off a stunner on Sunday, it would put Washington in an interesting spot in the wild card chase. No, I think let's get the win first. By the way, right now, Washington would be the biggest anti-public play of the entire football weekend. The entire weekend. There is more public wagers and more public money on Detroit right now than any team on the college or NFL board. And by the way, the lines come down. It is now 8 in a few spots. I even saw a 7.5 from where it was the other day at 9.5. Yeah, that's like the meshing of the two things that 2 of the 3 things that are most important for me in the smell test. Anti-public, and then where's the sharp money? The sharp money, amazingly, is on Washington, and the public money is overwhelmingly on the Lions. So I'm pretty sure in tomorrow's smell test, I will have Washington plus the big number at home. We've seen it all year in the NFL. The big underdogs have covered and won outright, many, many times. This year, it happens every year, actually, in the NFL. But what would be the reason for sharp money on Detroit? Well, I think what Dan Miller told us yesterday is part of the issue. They are injured too, especially along their offensive line, where Penei Sewell could miss on Sunday. You could argue he is their best football player, pound for pound on that team. So they had some injuries. They came off a game in which they got battered around by that Minnesota defense, really battered around on Sunday. So They're probably, the Sharps are probably giving Washington a chance to hang in there, and play well. Rain's in the forecast for Sunday, but I don't think it's for game time. I think it's before the game begins. Washington, the home team, it certainly doesn't feel like the game we were hoping it would be when the schedule came out, or even a few weeks ago, a rematch of the divisional round playoff game and, a matchup of two of the NFC's, good teams. We have a good team and we've got right now a bad team. But in terms of Chick, like, where do we go from now? What are the solutions? Look, you're not, Adam Peters and company are thinking about, the long term. And it is a surprise, we talked about this yesterday. It is a surprise to me that they didn't pull the trigger on something. They probably were in communication and were trying to potentially pull off a deal to bring some picks back. They have 6 picks right now. We've talked about these. First, third, 5th, 2 6th, and a 7th. They do not have a 2nd or a 4th. Those went as part of the Tunsil deal in the offseason. It's not like they have 3 picks. You are allotted 7. They have 6. They just don't have a 2nd and a 4th. So, it is not one. It's not close to a typical allotment, even though the total picks are 6, 1 less. It's where the picks are. They can still, make some moves. They could use that first rounder, which right now would be borderline top 10 to move back and pick up more picks. We'll see how it works. The solution, though, right now, Chick, from, a Dan Quinn coaching staff and player standpoint, is to try to win some games and get back into this thing. I'm being serious now. I understand what the odds are. I understand what the team looks like. We stink right now. I mean, we are terrible on defense. And there doesn't appear to be like a solution defensively. But NFL seasons every year are just wild. Now, if we were in week 12 or week 13, we could start focusing in on the draft, free agents, etc. I think we need to wait a few weeks. They're 3-6. They're not 0-9. They're not 1-8. They are 3-6, and they'll have the opportunities with games to work their way back into this thing. Do I think it's going to happen? I don't. Let me just be clear on that. I'm talking from their standpoint. The coaches aren't coming up with solutions for next year. The players aren't thinking that. They're thinking, how can we pull off a stunner at home on Sunday against a team that just took a beating, offensively? They've got some injuries along their offensive line, so they may be banged up like we are. How can we pull off a shocker, which happens all the time in the NFL, to totally change the narrative in 1 60-minute, 3-hour, window? Because if they pulled it off, and they won a 21-20 game, and Monday morning they're 4-6 going to Madrid to face the Dolphins, off of some news that may come later today that Jaden could be back in a couple of weeks, in a month or so, and only miss 3 games, because we got the bye week coming up. I mean, our fan base isn't any different than a lot of other fan bases. I think it's just been more of a recent phenomena. That recency bias is what it is. Like, what you saw Sunday is what it is. We've lived in this world for a few years now, especially on social media. The declarations after one game are just amazing to me. I mean, it just doesn't, it doesn't usually work out. If you're going to declare things about an NFL team or an NFL season, before the halfway mark, you're pretty much guaranteed to be wrong because of how quickly things change. Again, I want to be clear. The solutions we can talk about, Chick, down the road. What do they need? They need everything, man. They need, most importantly, let me just tell you, they need to find themselves an absolute A player on defense, a player that needs to be game planned for. Maybe not next year, maybe not in 2027, but by the time we get to 2028 in year 3, that player is a monster. They've got to find that defensive stud. All right. And then offensively, they've got to find a true elite playmaker at the wide receiver position, in my opinion, in the offseason. They invested in their offensive line this past offseason. Hopefully, the maturation of a Coleman and a Connerly Jr. starts to take place, and they're not wrong on those players. Look, ultimately, it looks like Chris Paul's going to be a hell of a player. That's a find from this year. It's not like you got to go out and find and search for a guard, because Allegretti's too old. You have maybe the answer at guard. You've got your interior offensive line, Biotish, Cosme, and Paul, and you should have Tunsil and Connerly locked down going into next year. You got to give Jaden some weapons. You need Terry back next year, healthy, right from the jump after a full camp. But I think you need a fear-inducing defensive player, and in addition to your quarterback, another fear-inducing offensive player. I think that certainly would help. Obviously, there's a lot more, right? They need so much on defense. So much. I think they got Kinlaw right, but they're going to move on from Payne. There's no doubt in my mind they're going to move on from Payne. So they're going to need another interior answer. They're going to need edge answers. I mean, Armstrong is a guy that I'm sure they'll want to bring back. He is a keeper, I think. Wise at this point, after the seriousness of his injury, probably not, right? 1-year deal, probably not. So they got ends, they've got, corners, they've got a lot on defense. But really, they've got to come up with some A players on offense and defense, because right now they've got one, I think maybe 2 A players on the team, 3 when he's healthy, right? Jaden Tunsil, and Terry. Right, in terms of true A players. But Terry's not the fear-inducing receiver. Sorry, I know that triggers so many of you. He's just not. You don't game plan for Terry. You game plan for Jackson Smith and the Jigba. Okay, you game plan for, there's 7, 8, 9 guys you game plan for. Terry's not one of those guys. He's a phenomenal contested catch guy, and there's something to be said for all guys like that. But in terms of the immediate, solution, Chick, beat Detroit. That's so cliche. I get it. But imagine if they could pull it off Sunday, where the conversation would be on Monday. That you got to wait through these things. These NFL seasons are they're so dynamic. They're ever changing. They're ever evolving. I don't think this team, because of its defense, has a chance to get back into it and win 10 games. I don't think that that's possible. I don't think they can win 7 of their final 8 to go 10-7 and have a backdoor shot. I don't. I think the defense is just so wrecked and so bad, and that's where a lot of the offseason focus will be. But crazier things have happened. I mean, the Carolina Panthers right now are 5-4. The Indianapolis Colts are 7-2. The Panthers lost last week to Buffalo 40-9 and then just beat the Packers at Lambeau. Yeah, they've got better, defensive players. No doubt. They've got better defensive players. Yeah. All right. Few things to get to, including a couple of things that Dan Quinn said yesterday. He answered, I thought, a very interesting question from John Keim about the mental toll that this injury-plagued season has taken on the team. And then I thought he made a very interesting comment about how the offense needs to perhaps focus a little bit more on running the football. You'll hear both of those. Denton will join us at the end of the hour, 10:40, to talk some college football. It's the Kevin Sheehan Show on the Team 980, theteam980.com. We're also free and live on the Odyssey app.
With Jaden not on IR, what's the update on him? With the plan for him?
Yep, we are actually going through a final medical meeting today regarding second opinions and that to put the plan together. So we should have an update for you here, the next day or so. Just being thorough through the whole process, like all the guys, to make sure all the opinions and then gather all the info and then make the decisions from there.
Dan Quinn yesterday answering John Keim's question about getting an update on Jaden. So maybe today, maybe tomorrow, we'll find out more about when he's coming back. And then we can have the conversation when he does come back based on their record, whether or not we all think he should play. Now, if it's, a 3 to 4 or 5 week injury, something like that, where he misses 3 games or 4 games, they do have the bye week in, and he comes back and there's still 5 games left or 4 games left and he's healthy, if that's how it turns out, I doubt I'm going to feel any differently than I feel today, which is he plays. You play him. There is context to all of this. If Terry's not back, if, they lose Debo again and you got, basically a bunch of practice squad guys running around out there at wide receiver, that might, impact the decision. But to me, he's a second-year player. And you can't, have him ultimately, when all is said and done, after a 17-game schedule, having played 5.5 games, because that's what it would be if he doesn't play another game this year, 5.5. And none of those 5.5 were with a full, loaded, arsenal, not even close. So in maybe the last 4 he would play, or the last 5 he would play, wouldn't be with, they're not going to ever get healthy defensively the rest of the way. We understand that. But I don't know. I think, second-year quarterback, he plays when he is ready to play, if indeed that materializes. We'll see. I have a feeling that it's not going to be season ending, but maybe it will be. Maybe we'll hear today he's going on injured reserve. All right. There were a couple of other Dan Quinn sound bites from yesterday that I thought were interesting. So I was just talking about and answering Chick's, a note to me, so Kurt Warner, your punt return guy, yada, 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 talking about the breakdown of Jaden, et cetera, from the game the other night. Where do we go from here? As you say, Sheehan, solutions, please. Dan Quinn was asked yesterday, I think by Barry's Verluga, about how, he balances kind of what's in front of him, what I was just talking about, the focus from the coaching staff on this, but also, with what's good for the long term. Now, this may have been more about, Jaden and playing him, if he comes back, et cetera. But here's Dan Quinn's answer.
Dan, is there any balance between what's right in front of you, the Detroit game, that game that week, and the big picture of what's good for this roster, this team in the long haul?
Well, I think always you want to this, you may or may not have heard this term, but win now, but develop for tomorrow. And I think you can have both buckets. If you're organized and thoughtful in how you're developing players, we know some first and second year guys, there's going to be more bumps in the road than just a veteran who's played lots and lots and lots. That's to be expected, but you can do both. And that's our approach here to make sure I love on the first and second year guys, some of the developments that they're making. It goes sometimes this and then this, and man, it'd be awesome if it just kept going up, but that's not how development works. So I think the balance of both is important, but I think you can have 2 buckets, and I think you can do both simultaneously. Some shift based on opponent, where you're at, but I think you can do both.
That last part of that answer is, I think, something that some of you, not most of you, some of you should take some stock in. This is a longtime NFL veteran coach telling you that, I love the first and second year guys, some of the developments that they're making, but it goes sometimes this and then this way, and it'd be awesome if it were just always going up, but that's not how development works. That's why when it comes to drafts, you've got to wait. You just have to wait. Mikey Sanderstill's not having a great season. He had a really good season as a rookie. Brandon Coleman, really good season as a rookie, inactive for a bunch of games this year. Now he's been active recently. We'll see. But you can't declare anything on any of these guys. You just don't know yet. It just takes time. Young players, especially at certain positions, the positions where sooner rather than later, running back, sooner rather than later. I think, pass rusher, sometimes sooner rather than later. Even wide receiver to a certain degree, sooner rather than later. But playing DB takes a lot of experience. Playing offensive line, some of these positions take a lot of experience. Clearly, it's the case at quarterback. So I thought him working that into the answer was interesting because I think it's, again, we live in, the era of incredible recency bias. Whatever just happened is the way it is. And so one week, Trey Amos is defensive rookie of the year. The next week, he can't play. One week, Bill is going to be the NFL offensive rookie of the year. And now it's like, yeah, we may have been a little bit off on that. Running backs are interesting, though. Like running backs, typically, immediately. It takes the least amount of experience to play. I think most coaches would tell you what's the position in which you can come in and play immediately and have immediate impact. They would all go to running back first. Now, they'll also say the problem, of course, is a lot of young players aren't good in pass pro, and you have to be good in pass pro, in this league, the way it's played now. So he was also asked by John Keim about just the injuries and the mental toll the injuries have taken on the team. Here's what the coach said.
Then we've talked a lot about the physical toll of the injuries, and just like guys who are missing. What's the mental toll on this many injuries on a team? When you see, I know it's next man up, but what's the mental toll like?
Yeah, it's a great question, John. It is because there's continuity issues that take place first off when you have an injury of people, not in sync all the time together. But the mental toll, it's definitely a big one. It's also for the guys that are out, some that are out that'll come back, some that are out for the season. And the ones that I worry about are the ones out for the season. As far as the mental toll collectively, team, like everybody goes through it, and some stuff, not injuries, but I'm saying hard things, and you find your way and you adapt. But it's better to acknowledge it, talk about it, and find the best plan moving forward. And if you have, the right mindset to go solve the problems, then, okay, this is what we need to go do, and this is how we need to go do it. And I think just being straight about it, John, is the best approach to eliminate any doubt. And this is how we're going to go win, and each game's winnable. And you have to say, this is how we're going to go do it for this game. And that may look different week to week. But for us, that's where the focus goes. And I try to explain that in the beginning of the week, and then you try to make that come to life through the game plan and the practice. And so having a whole week to go do that against a talented Detroit team, like we'll need the whole week and the practice to do that.
Later on in the press conference, he was asked a question about I think it was the trade deadline question, but he talked about the injuries again. And he said the hardest, when you get a rash of injuries, the most difficult rash of injuries is essentially when you get hit at one position with multiples. Was his quote, like wide receiver and defensive end, because then you got to go outside and you got to pull in people who have not been with you since, spring. And that just makes it harder. And obviously at wide receiver and defensive end, they've been devastated with injuries, and they've had to go outside and pull people in. I mean, Traylon Burks was on the field for 30 plus snaps the other day. I thought that was an interesting point. We think about the most injured teams and the impact that the injuries have, but he went a step further and said it really becomes difficult when you get hit at one or two positions in multiples. In defensive end, they lost their top 3 defensive ends. I mean, when does that happen? Their receivers, they've been essentially without 3 of their top 4 or 5 now with McCaffrey out, but number 1, most importantly, has been out a bunch, and number 2's been out basically the whole season, and number 3 has missed a couple of games and actually has played banged up in a couple of games in Debo. I say number 3 because he's not, a true receiver. He's more of a weapon. Here was the last soundbite that I wanted to play because I thought this was actually kind of interesting. He was asked about what numbers? What number? 10, right? 10. I'm looking at.
Yeah.
He was asked about the injuries and having to run the football more, which we know they haven't done enough of. At least that's my view. I think it's the view of many of you. Here was his answer.
Dan, with the injury to Jaden and also all the receiver injuries, it kind of leads to a natural progression of running the ball more. When a defense is aware that you might be doing that more and stacking the box, things of that nature, what goes into still remaining effective, in the run game during those moments?
Yeah, what I think you're saying is like, shots, at bat. And so sometimes the play pass that can come off the run game can be where you have to, make your mark to go. So there can be some times where a 1 yard run or a 2 yard run, that's what like the stats would show. But the byproduct of that is this linebacker or the safety going downhill. Can you get a play pass in behind them? And so I think that's the balance of playing first and second down football. And we need to be more effective at both. The more effective you run, play action should be, a little bit more effective, but you have to take the shots at the run game to do that. And that's one of the areas that, is really important to us. We got good O-line, running backs to get rolling. So I wouldn't say it's like more important now. It's always a big part of, playing good offense when you can have balance. So, we look forward to improving in that area, I should say, instead of more or less.
I thought it was interesting at the end. I could be completely projecting here and inaccurately when he said a couple of times, that we've kind of done that. And then at the very end, he says, so we look forward to improving in that area. I should say instead of more or less. Like Detroit, don't expect us to run more than we have, even though that's what our plan is. I think there's going to be a huge emphasis with Cliff from the head coach to be a lot more balanced. It doesn't make any sense to me. And I like Cliff Kingsbury, and I give him a lot of credit for what happened last year. And look, if you're being reasonable and objective, what he's had to deal with all of the key players being out on offense, including the quarterback missing a bunch of games, it's not really, in my opinion, fair to judge him on the season. Although I think part of it is you can judge based on how did he react to those situations? How did he, make chicken salad out of chicken? You know what? Did he do that? I don't know. They moved the football pretty effectively against the Chiefs. They moved the football pretty effectively against the Chargers, missing some pieces. They've done it a few times here and there. They played a really good football team on Sunday night. Let's not forget that. They played a really good football team. But they came out and 9 of the first 10 play calls were passes. They decided they weren't going to run the football against the best rush defense in the league. I think maybe they should have tried. It's easy in hindsight. I think Quinn thinks they should have tried more. And I think that especially with Mariota in the game and their less, resistance to really making him a true part of the run game. And Jaden is part of it too as a scrambler this year. But with the injuries, they backed off some on some of the design and some of the option stuff. Not all of it. But I think they want to run the football. In Detroit, as an example, they're a good rush defense team, not the best. I think they're 10th or 11th in the league, something like that. But they've given up some yards in games. Like last week, gave up a lot of yards on the ground to Minnesota. That's the way Minnesota protected J.J. McCarthy in the game. They ran the ball in the game 29 times. They attempted 25 passes in the game. Now, McCarthy had some scrambles, so there were called pass plays in the game, but Aaron Jones rushed for 8.7 yards per carry. Jordan Mason was 10 for 36. That's 3.6, but the two of them combined were 19 for 114. So I think Sunday we're going to see them focus on running the ball. What'll be interesting to me is, are they going to do it with Rodriguez or are they going to do it with Bill? I don't care which one, really. I'd like to see Rodriguez, though, be a part of it more so. But if they know, who's been taking advantage of the opportunities when they've had them and who they feel comfortable with. But I think that answer is, we're going to run the football. Oh, I don't want to tell you that we're going to run the football. So we're really not doing more or less. We're just, that's kind of who we are. No, it hasn't been who they are, but it might be who they become. We'll talk some college football with Denton next.
All right, everybody. It is Thursday, November 6th. Some breaking news this morning as Cowboys defensive lineman Marshawn Nealon has passed away at the age of 24. Very little details surrounding the circumstances of his sudden passing, but he recovered the Cowboys blocked punt in the end zone on Monday Night Football just 3 nights ago. Some national news that ESPN Bet is no more. The sports news empire is into their agreement with Penn National Gaming just 2 years into their 10-year, $2 billion deal. ESPN Bet app will be shut down next month. 8 years remaining on the gambling mega deal. Plus, last night, the Wizards, they notched another loss on the totem pole as they fall to 1-7 in a 136-107 loss to Jaylen Brown and the Celtics. Again, Alex Sarr with another night to remember offensively, tying his season high of 31 points with 8 boards and 2 assists. The Caps, they get back in a big way last night, beating up on the St. Louis Blues 6-1. One of those 6 goals was scored by Alex Ovechkin for his 900th career tally. The first player in NHL history to reach 900 goals and without a doubt the greatest goal scorer of all time. Caps get going again tonight, this time against the Pittsburgh Penguins. Puck drops at 7:30. Pregame coverage underway on 106.7 The Fan. That'll get going at 7:15. John Walton, Ken Sabrin, Katie Florio on the call. This update is sponsored by the Team 980 YouTube page. Just open the app, type in the Team 980, hit subscribe. Kevin Sheehan is live every day from 10 to 1. You can catch Den's office throughout all of football season. Don't forget to hit the like button whenever you do decide to join us and turn on notifications to stay up to date on all things DC sports. And that is what's trending.
Pick up your book bags. Grab your notebooks. It's time to go on campus with Denton.
Give me my theme music.
Denton Day, the former producer of this very program, joins me every Friday in this spot to talk college football and some Commanders as well. He hosts the Commanders pre- and post-game show on 106.7 The Fan and this station, the Team 980. And he's the host of College Football Overtime and other college football shows on Sirius XM. You can follow Denton on X, on Twitter, at the Denton Day. So last night, I started to get ready for this weekend, looking at all the games. There was 1 point spread that stuck out like a sore thumb, and I'm wondering if you saw it too. There's one that just seems completely wrong more than any other. It's a top 25 matchup. Did you see it?
There was one to me that was crazy long. So maybe is that when you're talking Texas Tech and BYU?
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah, I saw that number. I knew Texas Tech was going to be the favorite at home, high-powered.
10.5-point favorites at home against an undefeated BYU who's ranked a spot ahead of them.
Yeah, 10 is massive. I was thinking maybe like 4.5. So 10.5 is huge. But if you remember, this is what the books love to do against BYU. They must have something against Mormons because they did like 3 weeks in a row last year, and it didn't matter. Like they were just. I mean, at one point, Colorado was favored against them by like 4.5 last year, I think it was, and they smoked them. So I don't know what it is about BYU, but the bookmakers don't love them that much.
By the way, if you haven't watched BYU, their quarterback is a guy by the name of Bear Bachmeier, and his jersey number is 47. He actually wears 47 as a quarterback. It just looks so weird. But yeah, Texas. Look, we know how much the odds makers love Texas Tech all year long. And the one game they lost to Arizona State, they were without their starting quarterback. So, I mean, to me, like that's get to the window as quickly as you can and lay the 10. See if you can get a 10 or a 9.5 somewhere and lay them, because this is going to be a beatdown on Saturday afternoon in Lubbock against BYU. It's like the Utah game last week. Didn't we say the same thing about Utah-Cincinnati? We're like, how is that number that big? They crushed Cincinnati.
Crushed them. And it was close in the second half, and then they just flipped the switch, and all of a sudden, in the blink of an eye, it was like a 30-point game.
Yeah. All right. Give me your, likes and dislikes from the first college football rankings that came out on Tuesday night.
So the big dislike is less a dislike and more just a point of confusion. I don't know why Notre Dame is 10. I don't mind them being ahead of Miami. The games have to matter. But if you look at what Miami has done in recent weeks and what Notre Dame has done in recent weeks, I can understand why you would have Notre Dame above Miami, because it feels like Miami is in a bit of a free fall. What I do not understand, Kevin, is why Notre Dame is ahead of Texas and Oklahoma. Because what have they done resume-wise that would suggest they are more deserving of the 10 spot, which is, like that 10 spot is highly coveted because there's a group of 5 that's not even in the top 25, so they would get 12, and then an ACC champion or ACC representative would get 11. So effectively, Notre Dame is the cutoff right now. If the playoffs were to start today, I don't know what they have done that is better than Texas and or Oklahoma. The win against USC was a good win, but their second best data point is a close loss to Texas A&M, whereas Texas has quality wins, Oklahoma has quality wins, and all 3 of those teams have 2 losses. So I didn't love where they were ranked. I'm confused as to why Notre Dame was ranked ahead of those 2 programs.
All right. First of all, acknowledgement here. I was, and I think you too, we were both dead wrong about Miami. And I have been wrong about Carson Beck. He just can't deliver in the clutch. And that interception in overtime against SMU was a horrible, horrible throw. The other pick in the game was not his fault. It was a drop, but whatever. I guess my rebuttal would be, right now, there's no way Notre Dame isn't a sizable touchdown favorite minimum against Texas and Oklahoma, and maybe like a little bit less against Miami because of Miami's talent. They're favored against all 3 of those teams, and it's not a short favorite.
I think it'd be short. I think it would be less sizable against a team like Oklahoma because Oklahoma's defense is disgusting. And I think they would put a lot of pressure on CJ Carr. And really, if there's one team that can take away or at least severely limit Jeremiah Love, who is the best running back in the country, like bar none right now.
Easily.
He's fantastic. If there's one defense that could limit him, I would say it's Oklahoma. The problem is, none of these teams have great quarterbacks. Like we've talked a lot about John Batier. And at the beginning of the year, he was a whole lot of fun, but he was really a lot of fun with his legs. And he was, dare I say, can I invoke the name of old number 4? He was kind of like that. He couldn't throw very well, but he was a gamer. And he
number 4, I'm not
legs.
following. Who's number 4 at Oklahoma?
Taylor Heineke.
Taylor Heineke
here.
Oh.
Yeah, he would make plays with his legs to make you be like, whoa, this guy, wow, he's a dog, he's a gamer. But then when you ask him to make like a big time throw, you're like, that's not what you're looking for. No. And then Arch, man, like, I don't know. Look, man.
Well, what do you think about Arch? All of a sudden, he's coming around. He's playing better. Look, he
did play well.
That's a good win last week, and the score was not reflective of how badly Texas. And by the way, if you were laying the 3, which I bought the hook and laid the 3. I got the push out of it. That was a painful game to lose. I mean, Texas was up 34-10 in the fourth quarter, and Vandy scored 21 to end the game and almost got the onside kick at the end. But what do you think about Arch and his comeback?
I think he's been better. I think a lot of it is should be on Sark. I think the play calling against Vanderbilt was significantly better, but that was a really great example. As fun of a team as Vanderbilt has been, and Diego Pavia is polarizing. Texas is so much better talent-wise, especially on the outside, than Vanderbilt, and they exploited that. I mean, that first play was a great example. We are better athletes than you are outside. You cannot catch us. Here's a swing, 75 yards to the house, and at that point, it was kind of over, or at least offensively they were rolling. Then they get the fumble on Pavia, and they score again, and it was over. I do think Arch is playing better, but this is kind of what Texas is, right? Like, this dude was never going to be the savior. Anyone that thought that was out of their mind. But if they're doing what they're doing now, I mean, Texas, to me, Kevin, is the team that has the best opportunity to get in as a 3-loss team. Because if they're a 3-loss team, that means they either beat Georgia or Texas A&M, and their resume stacks up better than any 3-loss team has ever stacked up resume-wise. With a win against Oklahoma when they were a top 10 team, with a win against Vanderbilt last week when they were a top 10 team, and then presumably either Georgia or A&M, whoever they beat in this fantasy scenario, would also be a top 10 team, potentially a top 5 team. They would get in as a 3-loss team, I think.
I mean, no league right now has hurt itself more by eating its own than the ACC. I mean, Georgia Tech losing to NC State, that kind of looked fishy going into it. I did give out the Wolfpack. The SMU beating of Miami, and I think we got another one coming up this weekend. I think Virginia's in a dangerous spot against Wake Forest. But right now, if I told you the ACC just got one, who is it?
I think it would be Louisville. I think they're playing the best right now.
You think they're playing better than Pitt?
I think they would beat Pitt. So maybe Pitt's playing just as well, but I think Louisville would beat Pitt. Your boy, Miller Moss. And really, it's more about Jeff Brom, I would say, than anything.
He's so good.
The thing with UVA is their quarterback is good. Like, Chandler Morris, a really good quarterback. They just flirt with disaster, like, very, very frequently. I mean, the game against UNC, they were in it a little bit more than they should have been against Cal, even though that number looks bigger because of that pick 6 at the end, which was huge for anyone laying the 5.5, by the way. But I think they're flirting a little bit with disaster too frequently. I trust Louisville a little bit more. They've been in these positions before. They got a lot of guys on that team that were part of that team last year who was in a very similar spot. They just couldn't quite get over the hump. And I think beating Miami this year was them turning the corner. For whatever we feel about Miami now, at the time, that was a massive win, one of the biggest of the season in college football. I feel like they've turned the corner a little bit, and I don't think it was an accident. As much as I have some issues with the way that the committee does things, I don't believe it was an accident that you have 4 ACC teams sandwiched between 14 and 18.
By the way, who's a really good football coach? Pat Narduzzi at Pitt.
Really
that
good.
Team's
really
always they seem to always get more out of less. Their schedule, and I didn't realize this, it's brutal the rest of the way. It's Notre Dame after a bye week this weekend, at Georgia Tech, and they finish with Miami. So the opportunity is there for Pitt to make a run into the ACC title game and then into the field. And they have been playing great. The Louisville situation, we talked about them before the year, and I thought the Braum Miller Moss combination was going to be a good one. They lost inexplicably to Virginia. I shouldn't say inexplicably because of what Virginia's done, but they had so many opportunities in that game. That seems like 2 months ago now, and may have been actually. All right, give me upset alert teams this weekend.
So I guess are we going upset by the number or by the ranking? Because if we're going by the ranking,
whatever.
BYU.
We know what feels like an upset.
Yeah, so BYU, I guess, would technically be on upset. Alert.
Right. But they're 10-point under.
We're not going to play that one. If Bo Preble was playing for Missouri, maybe Texas A&M, the game.
You don't think the backup is better?
No, I don't. I think Preble is better.
I don't think Preble is that good. But go ahead.
The game that I would say scares me a little bit would be Oregon and Iowa. Oregon laying 6 on the road, but they've been. Last week. They had a nice win. It was great. Dante Moore did not look good. 9 of 15, under 100 yards in a full FBS game. And this is a guy that 4 weeks ago was not the Heisman favorite, but he was top 3 in Heisman odds. I don't know what's happened to him, but he's coming back down to earth a little bit. And I love Dan Lanning. I think he's excellent. I think that team is built really well. But it does feel like when they lost to Indiana, that was a massive punch to the face that they took, and I don't know that they fully recovered. It's like a boxer he's still standing. He's still in the fight, but you can tell his legs are wobbling a little bit, and one more punch is just going to completely discombobulate him. Iowa could be that team. I know offensively no one thinks of Iowa as a juggernaut.
Better this year.
They're the only team that's played Indiana well this year. And I think that now really stands out as Iowa is finally in the top 20. So Iowa getting 6 at home against Oregon, that one just could be a outright upset, but I feel pretty good about that number for the Hawkeyes.
I love that one, and I think they might have the most impressive loss of the season if Notre Dame doesn't. And Notre Dame really couldn't have botched it on their own more than they did against A&M. But the fact that Iowa legitimately had the lead against Indiana in the fourth quarter and had a chance to beat this Indiana team that has just been an absolute wrecking ball against everybody else. I love Iowa Saturday. Plus, Kinnick for a big game is really difficult. I think Virginia, like Wake got crushed last week by Florida State. Virginia, as you said, the score looks more impressive than the game against Cal, and that number is under a touchdown. Wake to me looks like a team that could spoil things for Virginia. Are we still with Ohio State and Indiana being the clear-cut 2 best teams in the country?
Yes. Yeah, until we see those 2 teams play or until one of them loses, that is going to be a rather emphatic yes. I would say just pay attention to Iowa or Indiana and Penn State this weekend. Kurt Cignetti's a sicko. He's a crazy person. Ohio State beat them 38-14. I have a feeling that Indiana is going to try and run up the score a little bit as a way of showing the committee anything that they can do, we can do better, and we're deserving of that number 1 seed or that number 1 spot right now. So I would just pay attention to that game as we look into this weekend.
That's interesting because I think Penn State's actually been a little bit feisty here the last couple of weeks after they fired Franklin. I mean, I know that what the final score was. It was 17-14 at one point in the third quarter in Columbus. They certainly had a shot to beat Iowa, a legitimate shot to beat Iowa. And I think that they're still good on defense. Maybe I'm nuts about that after what UCLA did to them. But that's a very intriguing game to me. But your point is a really good one because Cignetti really has that, backed into a corner, nobody believes in us kind of a thing going, and they are really, really good. All right. Any thoughts? I'm sure you did. And I did not hear the post-game show with you and Linnell, but just off of, Sunday night, what are your biggest, Washington takeaways?
Well, do you want to talk about Ruben Bain, how great he is in Miami? That's kind of been the takeaway. Is that should I drop him off draft?
They're not gonna be able to draft high enough for him.
Hopefully, right? I mean, unless like the Jets.
He's top 3, don't you think?
Yeah, he's probably top 3. Honestly, what we need to see if the Skins really want to add a guy like Ruben Dane, which I would not, by the way, draft a wide receiver that high. So for anyone's, it's like we need a top wide receiver that I would not. I need Fernando Mendoza to start really balling. Like we just need a bunch of quarterbacks to really start balling out and have the teams like the Jets and whoever else is up there to be really infatuated by those quarterbacks. It does now feel like the season is at a really weird place because it kind of feels like it's over and it's very disappointing. I still am of the belief that Jaden could come back this year, and I think I might be in the minority when I say I would like him to. You know, we've had this back and forth.
I'm with you.
I listened to some of the stuff that you had with Steve Suter, who's always excellent. I watched the Kurt Warner video. I definitely think there are areas where he needs to improve, and I am of the belief that you get better at playing football by playing football, and you need to kind of get some of this rust, get some of these issues worked out, and there's no better way to do it on a football field. I would just like to see maybe some changes schematically and more running of the football with somebody not named Jaden Daniels, but he's just going to have to get used to throwing into what is a little bit tighter of windows. It's not fair. It's not easy, but that is the reality. If you want to perform like a top 5 quarterback, you're going to have to start throwing into some windows that are not nearly as large as they were last year, and certainly not nearly as large as they were in college.
Well, the good news is we know he can do it because he did it for 20 games last year, and did it for a couple of games this year too, actually. Thanks. Appreciate it. Denton pregame on Sunday. I'll join him postgame as well. I'll talk to you later.
Yeah, see ya.
All right, we'll do some NFL power rankings when we come back. Charch will join us at 11:25. You heard Denton bring up Steve Suter's film breakdown on my podcast yesterday. I've got about 20 minutes of it that I'm going to play for you at around 12 o'clock today. Really interesting stuff. Told him about the Kurt Warner stuff. He didn't know about it. He had a slightly different view of it, but he was, somewhat critical at times. But overall, you'll hear it at 12, promise. Kevin Sheehan Show, Team 980, theteam980.com. We're free and live on the Odyssey app. It's getting tougher every week, man, on these power rankings. I'm going to let you go first this week because every week I go first. And not that you're, looking at my
No, but
notes.
I understand you want to, have a little bit more time. And
no,
and you
I've
want to
got
see
mine
what
ready to
are.
go. I've got mine ready to go right now. I'm curious as to what you have. Top 5, and then maybe a team lurking outside that we think will eventually be in the top 5. Go ahead, give me your top 5.
Okay, I'm finishing writing up right now. I've got the Chiefs at 1. I know they lost to the Bills, but the Chiefs are the Chiefs, and I just refuse to bet against them at this point of the season, especially when they're getting everybody back and finding their stride. So Chiefs are at 1. Number 2, out of the NFC, the Los Angeles Rams. They've got Puka back. He's got a little bit of a rib injury, I think he suffered last game, but their offensive line is incredible. Their defense has been stout, and if Emmanuel Forbes has started to make plays for them, dude, look out. The Rams might be making a ton of noise coming down the stretch here. Number 3, I got the Bills coming off that win over the Chiefs. Just looking ahead, depends on kind of how they handle that game against the Patriots, but the rest of that season is pretty lax for them. Obviously there's no week in the NFL where you can just kind of look at an opponent and be like, meh, but I think the Bills can, win the majority of their games and make the playoffs and be fine. Number 4, the Detroit Lions coming up against the Commanders this week. This is going to be an Amon-Ra game. It's going to be a Jameson Williams game. I know it happened to us last week, and I said it was going to be the JSN game, and then JSN got 8 balls, no touchdowns, but I still think that, the Lions are going to eat this week and for the rest of the season be in a good spot for the playoffs. Number 5, this team that we have been raving about the past week and a half. I've got the Seattle Seahawks. Their defense looks legit. We'll see how they do against teams not named the Commanders, but throughout this season, they have proven themselves to be a formidable opponent. And then on the outside looking in, I've got the Eagles, the Colts, and the Packers. Those are my outside looking in that will probably end up being back in the top 5 at some point here, but that's my power rankings right now. What do you got?
So I made a list of, I think it may be the largest list. It may not be also.
It's a long list.
I don't know. I've got a list of 11 teams that you could easily make a case for being in the top 5. And by the way, not just at number 5, but anywhere from 3 to 5.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I'll go, division by division. Number 1, New England, you could make the case for. Buffalo, you could make the case for.
Absolutely.
I don't think you can make a case for anybody out of the AFC North right now for the top 5.
Yeah.
AFC South, Indianapolis,
sure.
Denver, and the Chiefs out of the AFC West. I did not include the Chargers there. Some might say you should have included the Chargers as a potential top 5 team. So that's 5 out of the AFC. In the NFC, Philly, obviously, the Packers and Lions out of the NFC North, the Bucks out of the NFC South, and Seattle and the Rams out of the NFC West. 6 NFC teams, 11 in total. And I left out, the 49ers. I left out the Chargers. I left out the Steelers. Somebody might say, "Oh, dude, the Ravens are going to be in your top 5 within 2 or 3 weeks." I'm not buying that, but it's an awfully crowded mid-season, And by the way, the overall Super Bowl odds and conference odds reflect that everything's tight and bunched up with a lot of teams in the mix. So my top 5 goes like this. At number 5, I'll go 5-1. I've got the Chiefs. I think I had the Chiefs at number 1 last week. You go to Buffalo, there's nothing wrong with that loss. I still think the Chiefs are really, really good. I just think it's really bunched up, and I'm going to give other teams a bit of a nod because I do think some of the teams I have in front of them would beat them in a Super Bowl matchup, meaning that I've got 3 NFC teams in front of them. Number 4, I've got Buffalo. Be hard for me to put Buffalo behind KC after they beat them. It was a home game. It was a close game, but they looked impressive doing it. And Buffalo's 6-2, and the Chiefs are sitting there at 5-4 right now. And then my top 3 teams are NFC teams. Philly's at 3. The Seattle Seahawks are at 2. And the LA Rams are my top team. You had them as the number 2 team in the league, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm telling you, this Seattle Rams thing in the NFC West, they play twice the rest of the way. They play a game which was not a big-time highlighted game on November 16th, 4:05 on Fox. It's not even the big doubleheader game. That's at SoFi. And then late in the season, and I mentioned this yesterday, this could be a game for the NFC West title and the 1 seed in the NFC. Seattle hosting the Rams on Thursday night, December 18th. Mark that one down. The good news, too, is there's no college football playoff game. The first college football playoff game is the next night, Friday night. Man, that is going to be that football weekend. You got Seattle Rams on Thursday night. The first playoff game of those first 4 playoff games in the college football playoff on Friday night. You got a triple header of college football playoff games at, by the way, home venues on Saturday the 20th, along with an NFL doubleheader, which will feature perhaps a team completely out of it in Washington against Philadelphia, but also Green Bay at Chicago. And then you've got the full slate of Sunday games, which, by the way, I'm going to tell you right now, the Sunday night Cincinnati-Miami scheduled game, that's a flex game if I've ever seen one. And I'll give you the flex spot. Moving into that spot will be the New England Patriots at the Baltimore Ravens for a Sunday night game. They play on Sunday, December 20th. That's an early flex call from your boy. New England at Baltimore, Sunday night, December 21st, flexed into the NBC spot. Cincinnati, Miami, back to a 1 o'clock game. You can't have that game in prime time. On a holiday weekend, heading into Christmas, that Sunday night spot is such a big spot. There's no chance we're going to see the Bengals with Flacco out there against Tua and the Dolphins, right? No chance. And the best game of the day could be New England at Baltimore. All right. Yeah, that's my top 5. Rams, Seattle. Wow, those 2 teams are good. So is Philly. How about what Philly's just added, right?
Man.
The additions to their roster, pre-trade deadline. Jair Alexander. Adding Alexander is sick. By the way, they're getting Nolan Smith back soon, too. Jalen Phillips, adding him. Michael Carter, adding him. They're going for it, man. Again, this is a defending champion that's saying, okay, we're a little bit different this year than we were last year. We're 6-2. We played some decent football. We played some bad football, but it really doesn't count until the second half of the season. And we're going to go out there and crush people. We'll see. We'll see. The NFC has the Rams and the Seahawks. They get the Buccaneers. They got the Lions. Got the Packers. Man, the NFC playoffs are going to be great when we get there. They're going to be phenomenal when we get there. I mean, it's just sickening that our team isn't a part of it. So I wanted to read a couple of emails that I got from various people. The Kurt Warner video really did go viral within our community, our fan base, our, people that care about our team. And I'm going to play for you Steve Suter's film breakdown from my podcast later on this hour, and then also in the 12 o'clock hour. By the way, Cliff Kingsbury speaks today. So does Joe Witt Jr. I'm very interested to see what Kingsbury, how he answers, certain questions. I would assume that there are going to be some questions about Jaden's performance, about their lack of running the football, especially early in the game. Cliff doesn't give you a lot weekly. Joe Witt gives you, basically half-page answers. When you get the transcribed, press conferences, Cliff's is like 3/4 of a page for all the questions, and Joe Witt Jr.'s is like 3 pages every week. So we'll get detailed explanations from Joe Witt Jr. on why they got, torched over and over again. Here's what I don't want to hear from him today. Guys got to stop putting capes on. You can't blame this on the players. Even if it's true that it's the players, you got to take a little bit accountability for this at some point. I got this from Aiden in Chicago. Aiden wrote, Kevin, big Skins fan out here in the Midwest. Been a listener and have never called or written until today. I think you got way ahead of your skis on our brittle quarterback. He might be better than the QB here in Chicago, but not some of the others that were taken in the same draft. Have you heard about Hall of Fame quarterback Kurt Warner's criticism of Daniels' second season? You should listen to it. I thought all along that you had gone a little bit too far in your praise after one season. Looks like you did. Thank you, Aiden, for that. Gary wrote, and I think we may have read this yesterday on the show. Watch this, Kev. He linked me to the Kurt Warner video. I told you he's a running QB, can't win long-term with these guys. He was lucky last year, never really processed it, never saw it like Warner said, just made plays off platform all season long. They made a big mistake. I got this one from Wayne. Wayne wrote, are you going to argue with one of your favorite QBs, Kurt Warner? I know you loved him as a player. Well, he doesn't like your quarterback very much. No, that's not true. And then he says, watch this video breakdown of Daniels. So, again, for those that didn't see it or didn't hear about it, Kurt Warner, yeah, I loved him as a QB. Kurt Warner was one of the fastest processing, quickest release guys of all time. Like his release was up there with Dan Marino's. And I loved watching him play the game. And I enjoy his analysis. I do. And I talked about this yesterday. I thought he made a lot of good points in his analysis. A couple of things that he didn't do that a lot of you thought he did, especially if you heard it secondhand, is this was not, a year-long review of Jaden Daniels. This was one game, the Seattle game. And he never said what my emailer Gary said, that he got lucky last year, that he didn't process it and didn't see it last year. He actually said the opposite of that. He said he had a very good year last year and he did see it and he did process it and he was great. Like you wouldn't do a video about regression if there was nothing to regress from, right? So, Gary, get a grip. Like that's not what he did. He actually was just breaking down this game and had, some plays from the Seattle game that he wanted to point out Jaden wasn't seeing in the same way that he excelled at a high level last year and saw it. He definitely cited examples that he said, and they made sense to me. And you're going to hear some of what Steve Suter said, because some of it made sense to see Steve Suter. Steve had a slightly different overall take, I think, than Kurt Warner did. But yeah, on the few plays that he went through, I saw some of it. And, for all of you that, insisted that I watch the video, as I mentioned yesterday, I did watch the video. And no, I would not come in here and say, Kurt Warner, who's he? Totally disagree with him. No, he's a Hall of Fame quarterback. And I actually enjoy his analysis, on social media. I've seen it, a few times, over the last couple of years. I think he did it on Jaden last year and was blown away. Somebody pointed out to me the video that he did last year on Jaden, where he was completely blown away about how advanced he was. I would just say, I think kind of what I said yesterday to a certain degree, it was just one game. It hasn't been, you're incorrect. It's not been what he's been in every single game this year. He's played in 5.5 football games this year. And the truth is he was outstanding against the Chargers. Outstanding in that game after the first two series. Looked exactly like Jaden Daniels looked last year. That was a game in which the defense, came up big with some key plays. Sanders still, in the fourth quarter for sure. He also was pretty damn good against Chicago, other than the fumble at the end in the rain. That was the devastating play. But if they win that game and he's got that one mistake, which was the early interception, you're like, that looked like a Jaden game. High completion percentage, completed 74% of his passes, rushed for 50 plus yards. That looked like a Jaden game. Like the idea that he's been off and has missed things. Yes, there's been some accuracy issues. We noticed that in the Giant game, even though overall the game against the Giants, I mean, he had 68 rushing yards, 233 passing yards, didn't make a real legitimate mistake the entire game in the opener. They won 21-6. The Green Bay game was rough, no doubt, rough. For everybody in that game. Charger game was pretty damn good. The Chicago game, pretty damn good, except for, you can't botch a handoff. Can't. With the game basically won. You're 1 first down away from taking 3 knees. The Dallas game, up and down, missed some things for sure. And then the Seattle game, without question, the game in which he looked the most kind of off and skittish. And I think there was a lot of context around that. I'm not disagreeing, although you'll hear Suter push back on some of it, but I think there was there's a lot of context around all of this. Unless you're just joining the season with us, there's been a major receiver problem because of injuries, which has impacted, rhythm, confidence, trust. There's been a pass rush issue in certain games, like on Monday night, where he was pressured at a rate per next gen of the highest of his career. There's no doubt that, there's been a little bit of rust here and there as he's been in and out of the lineup with, 2 previous injuries to Sunday night. He hasn't really had a chance to play his way into the season yet, in part because he hasn't been out there consistently. And secondly, he hasn't had his guys out there with him consistently. He's, had to deal with something he had to deal with last year, which he overcame, understood, but a defense that is just so bad that every time he steps out onto the field, they're down another 7 or another 3. I don't think Cliff gave him the best chance on Sunday night. And I'm a Cliff guy. I don't think he gave him the best chance on Sunday night. So there's that context, which, by the way, Warner pointed some of these things out and said there's a lot of context and there's a lot of reasons, but he's just going specifically with, 4 or 5 plays. He should have thrown it here, should have seen it here and pulled the trigger. But, so there was evidence, no doubt, on Sunday night that he hesitated, and perhaps because he wasn't seeing it, as Warner described. So there's a lot of that. But man, this is a season where, you can just say you are what your record says you are. Thank you, Bill Parcells. There's no doubt about that. And the quarterback, like the head coach, takes a lot of and bears, always a lot of the responsibility for 3 and 6. But there is context. And the number one point here, as I've said for a few weeks running, is that they are injured, seriously injured. That is the number one reason they are 3 and 6. And as Coach Thompson used to say, you can count 5 spots to get to whatever number 2 is. But number one is this team has been crippled by injuries to their most significant and meaningful contributors. I do not have any concerns through 29 football games about Adam Peters or Dan Quinn or even Cliff Kingsbury. And I certainly don't have any regrets or any fear that Jaden Daniels isn't a high-level, elite-level franchise quarterback. The one concern I have with him was the concern I had even pre-draft, and that is, will he stay a healthy quarterback throughout his career enough? And through 29 games, he's on injury number 4. That's not great. That's a legitimate concern. The rest of it, you don't have to agree. I'm not concerned about. Charch next. one of my favorite segments of our football season week, and a favorite of yours as well, is when we have Paul Charchian on the show. Charch, of course, a fantasy football guru, expert, long time. Lot of miles on Charch's fantasy body. Fantasy Football Weekly and Chop are the podcasts. He's been through the wars. He's been the School of Fantasy Hard Knocks lead professor with seniority for a long period of time. But we don't always talk fantasy when I have you on. People say that to me all the time. They're like, I love this segment you do with Charch every week. The football talk's great, but you kind of just, you're on the fringes of some of the fantasy stuff. I said, that's not true. We usually get to the crux of it, but you know me, that's not my thing. I'm a hardcore gambler more than I am a fantasy guy. Now, I've been in fantasy leagues and I've been in your guillotine leagues over the years, and they're fun. Yeah. Don't get me wrong. But yeah, so that's the deal with Charch. By the way, I loved your tweet about Kyler Murray. Like, they're putting him on injured reserve due to his foot injury, and you just, in quotes, foot injury. Like, I think we may be, and giving up on quarterbacks is crazy given the recent history of the resurrection of so many. But I think 5'5" quarterbacks are really difficult to play with. I think that it's going to be hard for Murray to ever have the kind of career that a number one overall suggests he should have. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, this feels like a great chance to take some cheap shots at Kyler Murray, particularly when you don't know how legit this injury is. Do you remember the play where he got the injury?
I don't.
This was the play where the ball was hiked into his helmet, and either the hike came early or he didn't see it coming. The hike goes into his helmet, and then he dives on the ball, and it's totally innocuous. I'm watching the foot the whole time because he left with a foot injury. I'm like, there was nothing obvious there. And I think that has played into this story of Kyler Murray. His body language always seemed disinterested. And we read in too much to that a lot of the time. You don't really know what's going on inside a guy's head and his heart. But the body language is always weird. He's paid a lot. And we hold our quarterbacks to a different standard when we pay them. They get paid that well. And then there's that whole bit with the clause in his contract about having to actually study the playbook for 4 hours each week and not while he's playing video games.
I forgot
you remember
about
that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And you roll that together and it just, I think it leaves people feeling like Jacoby Brissett gives this team a better chance to win. I think I feel that way. I suspect you do too.
Yeah, I talked a little bit about Jacoby Brissett on Tuesday morning after the game. He's just one of these guys. There are a lot of them. Josh Johnson's been around forever, Geno Smith, who ended up, having a legitimate, couple of years as a starter. Like Jacoby Brissett, you ask anybody and they're like, oh, he can throw it. He looks the part. He's 6'4", 220 or whatever he is, and he can really throw it. But over the years, for the most part, even though he was a Belichick pick and was in that New England system for a year, he hasn't gotten the true opportunity to be the number one for a full season. If he did, it wasn't on a good team in Indianapolis or Cleveland or whatever. But he was here, when Sam Howell was the quarterback. And look, Sam Howell was terrible here. He had a couple of games. I'm not going to suggest that he didn't prove to be, I thought, at least a backup in the league. But there's no doubt, had they started Jacoby Brissett that year, they would have won 3 or 4 more games, and they would have never gotten Jaden Daniels. They wouldn't have been a playoff team, but they wouldn't have been 4-13. They probably would have been 6-11 or 7-10 or something like that. But these guys that are smart, are great in the locker room, everybody loves. Like, he's 32. I was looking at this the other day. I bet you he's in the league for another 6 years, pulling paychecks.
Yeah. Yeah, probably so. Because Jacoby Brissett he doesn't have the raw physical tools that most of the other starters in the league have, but he's got smarts and he's got passion that you can see. And again, I always want to be careful about suggesting somebody is disinterested on the field. But man, when you watch Jacoby Brissett play, even for all those bad teams, he's played on 6 different teams, almost all of them bad, to your point. You can tell the guy's out there doing whatever he can to help his team win. And, that stuff, sometimes that stuff's just obvious and it's true. And I think that's why Jacoby Brissett is going to have a nice long career ahead of himself, not likely as a starter, but he's going to be one of those coveted backups and will end up being spot starter guy. And who knows? I mean, he's got 3 starts in this otherwise totally moribund Arizona offense, and he's thrown multiple touchdowns in all 3 games. So, maybe there's a little more upside with this kid than we know, because the teams he's been on have been so bad.
All right, we are at mid-season, 18-week season. We're through 9 of them. Tell me right now who you have as your final 2 in the NFC, final 2 in the AFC, in your Super Bowl matchup.
Well, I'm not going to say that I had an answer to that sitting on the top of my head, but I will say I think Seattle's going to win the NFC. And if I had to pick one team right now, it would be Seattle. I think Sam Darnold's going to win MVP. You can go get him at about 20-1 if you're interested in that. The Seattle team, Kevin, doesn't really have a weakness. They are awesome against the run. They've got a number of young, good cornerbacks in their secondary. Devon Witherspoon's great. The fact that they're 6-2 in a very hard division with the Rams and the 49ers, I think is a good sign for them as well. Sam Darnold's been great. They can run the ball. They've got Jackson Smith and Jigba. They just added Rashid Shaheed. They were already getting deep ball production out of Jackson Smith and Jigba. Here comes Rashid Shaheed, who's this amazing deep ball specialist. He's 12th in air yards this season, with Tyler Shuck and Spencer Rattler throwing worm burners his way. But you go now to Sam Darnold, who leads all quarterbacks in deep ball accuracy and is number 2 in deep ball completions. And Rashid Shaheed it's such a savvy trade. They gave up almost nothing to get him, and he's going to see nothing but single coverage because Jackson Smith and Jigba is going to vacuum up, every spare defender around him. So this Shaheed thing, he's gonna pop off for a bunch of big catches this year, and he's going to tilt some games their way. And if I had to pick one NFC team, I would take the Seattle Seahawks right now. I think this is the best. This is the most solid overall roster in the NFC.
Your AFC pick?
Well, that's more complicated. AFC, I would take. I hate to be so chalky, right? And just take the Chiefs, and the Chiefs just lost to the Bills. So it feels stupid, but still, in totality, I feel like the Chiefs have, I don't like the term pedigree, but when the playoffs come, they always seem to play their best. The defense has played really well for most of the last month. I wish they had pulled off the Breece Hall trade that we've seen come down the reporting of which has come down in the last hour. Looks like they tried to get him, and that would have solidified that team. But
I didn't see that
with Rashee Rice and Xavier Worthy. I still feel like this is potentially explosive offense. It's so chalky. I hate to say the Chiefs.
That's
but
all right.
I'll take the Chiefs. What about you?
Yeah,
Chiefs. Who do you got?
Well, I'm with you on Seattle. I think Seattle and the Rams are the 2 best teams in the NFC, and they play a Thursday night. They still play twice. They play a Thursday night, December 18th game that could really be a massive game in the NFL season. I think I watched a lot of Seattle before the show a week ago, leading into our game Sunday night.
Yeah.
And I came in here a week ago tomorrow, Friday, and I just said, this is a mismatch. This team is much better than I thought they were. We still had Jaden coming back, so I gave us a chance to win the game.
Yeah,
but Seattle's legit. I think the Rams are really legit, and I think those 2 games are going to decide it. I think that could be the NFC Championship game. I mean, we know how seasons change and injuries impact everything, like they have our season here for sure. But yeah, the Sam Darnold thing is interesting because that would be the one hesitation and why I think we did mid-season sort of adjustments to our predictions, and I went with the Rams over Seattle in the NFC title game because I think I just would go Stafford over Darnold. Darnold, what the last 2 games of the year looked like last year.
Well, yes, and I think he got sacked 15 times between those 2 games.
Yep.
And it was a bad look for Sam Darnold here in Minnesota. The last 2 games of last year, it was week 18 to secure home field throughout, and the Vikings lost. He got sacked 9 times, and then the playoff game after that against the Rams, and the Vikings were a no-show for that too. But this isn't the Vikings. This is a different team. I think you can the pass protection for Sam Darnold has been way better in Seattle than it was last year in Minnesota, and especially at the end of the season when the Vikings offensive line was all beat up. And I've seen nothing to suggest, regression from Sam Darnold. The only thing that people come back with is, well, those 2 games. And sure, there's that. But, that was the first playoff game of his career. He has the right to certainly get a lot better. And this system is absolutely working for Sam Darnold right now. And I just feel like this is the most complete team.
It is kind of nice to get, that opportunity. And you've got Justin Jefferson, not to mention Jordan Addison, and then you get to Seattle and you've got JSN. Not bad. And now you're getting Sheehan, as you talked about, which is a big time acquisition. All right, let's talk some fantasy. You in your notes, you mentioned Aaron Rodgers has been a shockingly good fantasy producer this year for Pittsburgh, but his top receiver hasn't been. Explain.
Yeah, DK Metcalf, just a shocking lack of consistency from DK Metcalf. You remember last year, Rodgers locked onto Devontae Adams to the point that, poor Garrett Wilson was like one of the 10 best receivers in the league, couldn't get a ball his way. Right. And we were mocking Rodgers for laser focusing on Devontae Adams as number 1 receiver. This year, DK Metcalf is 39th in wide receiver targets. That is not cool, Aaron Rodgers. And I have to assume a lot of blame goes to Arthur Smith, who loves nothing more than sending a dozen
17 tight ends
every game. Right,
yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
At 4 yards a pop, by the way. I mean, it's very Arthur Smith. Metcalf has become, because he's only giving you 4 catches a game, Metcalf's become incredibly touchdown dependent. And this is, when he does not score, he's materially hurting your teams. And this is not a great matchup in terms of scoring opportunities coming up this week. So I don't know. Metcalf's been a weird disappointment and an interesting story for a Pittsburgh team that I think has surprised many of us with their win total. I think, I think a lot of us thought this might be the first time sub 500 game for the Steelers. But yeah, it's been a strange one for sure.
Yeah, I think, it's funny that you say, materially hurts your fantasy team, and yet there's no doubt that DK Metcalf's presence on the field is why they're having some success. Aaron Rodgers has been super sharp. There's no doubt about that. But those tight ends and the backs are all benefiting from the, presence of Metcalf on the field. I don't think there's any question about that. So tonight, I mean, this isn't the best Thursday night matchup. Be careful, Denver. It just seems like when you least expected. But Brock Bowers insane last week against Jacksonville. But Ashton Genty, he's topped 100 yards once this year?
Yeah, that's it. He's 3.9 yards per carry. Offensive line, terrible for the Raiders. Lowest yards before contact is that offensive line. Less than 1 yard before contact for Ashton Genty. But Genty's been good. I mean, if you just isolate him and you just look at what he does with the ball in his hands, man, he does as much as you could ask. His avoided tackle rate is only behind Bijan Robinson and Jonathan Taylor, 2 of the best in the league. And then Ashton Genty's next. He's breaking tackles all over the field. Because the Broncos have got this excellent pass rush and secondary, even without Patrick Surtain. Teams try to run on the Broncos a lot and just get that running game going. It just usually doesn't work because they're really good there too. Last week, Houston's runners ran for 2.5 yards per carry. No back has topped even 60 rushing yards against Denver since all the way back in week 3. And Genty's a really good receiver, but over the last month, only 1 runner has topped 8 receiving yards against Denver. That's it. It is a really, really tricky matchup for Genty, who's he's worth having the TV on in the background just to see what he does, because he is a fun player to watch. But this is a really nasty matchup.
Yeah, that Denver-Houston game, man, that was not a game for the meek. That was, I mean, Stroud got knocked out. That was two of maybe the top 3 or 4 defenses in the NFL going head to head. I would imagine that anybody lining up against Washington's defense, let alone Jared Goff and company,
Right.
have to be pretty high up on your list this week.
Yeah, they all are. But let's note this: this offensive line for the Lions, the explosiveness
Banged
of the
up.
Lions' offense has withered a lot, and it's because of that. Taylor Decker's been playing hurt. Penei Sewell's been playing hurt. They both went in and out of the game last week. The backup to both of them is Dan Skipper. He's hurt. And by the way, he's like what is Dan Skipper, like 6 foot
6'10", I think. 6'10" or something like that, right?
Yeah. It's something absurd.
I think he's the tallest offensive lineman in the league.
I think you're right. Then last week, starting guard Christian Mahogany got hurt, and he went on IR this week. Obviously, given the way the defense is going in Washington, I still like all the Lions, but it might not be quite the bloodbath that people think just because its offensive line's not right. Vikings were able to get a lot of pressure on Jared Goff, disrupt a lot of the short routes that they love to run with Jahmyr Gibbs, and put Gibbs into a spot where he had to do a ton of pass protection. It wasn't all Vikings in that upset win last week. The Lions have got some defects across that offensive line.
You know, it's interesting. Washington's best games this year have come against teams that were banged up along the offensive line. The Giants in the opener, they did not have Andrews. No Joe Alt when they faced the Chargers. The Raiders were in disarray along their offensive line when they faced them. Their 3 wins and their only 3 defensive games in which they looked like an NFL defense were against banged up offensive lines. Now, they don't have the same D line that they've had all year, but maybe you're right. Maybe there's an opportunity here to take advantage of how injured the Lions are up front. Thanks, as always. I'll talk to you next week.
Well, can you give me 20 seconds on Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, who's averaging 39 scoreless rushing yards in the last month? Tough matchup with Detroit. They've been a very good run defense this year. What are your thoughts on his prospects going forward at this stage?
Well, first of all, and I just said this earlier in the show because of something Quinn said yesterday, I do think they're going to actually attempt to run the football this week. They really basically, waved the white flag before the game started and said, Seattle's got the number 1 rush defense in the league. And they called 9 pass plays on the first 10 snaps of the game. I can't answer it. Look, the euphoria that people have, it's a week-to-week league. People declare this is true after one game. And, our fans thought he was the NFL's, offensive rookie of the year after the game against the Chargers. And, the truth is Chris Rodriguez runs just as well. McNichols runs just as well. So if they do go to trying to run the football, I'm not even sure which of the backs is going to be the featured back. I would guess it's going to be Bill, but I'm not entirely sure of that.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I think the one thing that we've seen that I have liked, I think Jeremy McNichols really is sort of embracing the Austin Eckler role that we were hoping for. They're using him on the field in a lot of ways that just remind
He's a good
me
player.
of that role, and that was important. He is a good player, more than just a special teamer. I think that he's developed as I'm watching these last couple of games. I think Nichols has developed into somebody who can do the things that Austin Eckler had done for this team.
All right, you can only take one band's music with you to an island in which you're stranded. You ready? Here are your options because I'm looking through your Twitter. My Bloody Valentine, who you tweeted about the other day, Joy Division, which we've talked about before, The Cure, The Smiths, or I'll throw Radiohead in there. You only get one.
Well, okay. It can't be the Smiths because I'm alone on an island. And if Morrissey is the only voice in my head, I will swim out into the middle of the ocean and just drown myself. So it can't be the Smiths.
Right.
Radiohead for the diversity, right? You get everything from hard rock to warbling ballads to all the weird electronica to Johnny Greenwood's amazing guitar work. And that's unique.
The Benz is one of my all-time favorite albums, period.
I respect that. OK Computer. I like OK Computer better, but that's just me. And their new stuff is, all of their albums are epic in their own ways, and they're all so unique. No band to reach the popularity of Radiohead, I think, have done it with more different sounds and done it their
Fair.
way.
Yeah.
You know, the Benz and OK Computer put them on a path where they could have just done that sound of those two albums for 30 years and been very successful, and instead they reinvent themselves with virtually every album. And I have a ton.
So
of
it sounds like
Radiohead.
you're taking Radiohead with you. By the way, that would be my choice. It'd be close with The Cure,
okay.
but it would be Radiohead.
Similar reasons.
Is that your pick?
Yeah, Radiohead. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Radiohead.
I would too.
That would be my pick.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard not to be kind of happy and melancholy, sort of simultaneously, than listening to Fake Plastic Trees, one of the all-time great rock ballads of all time. All right,
I'll
good
take
job.
Karma Police, but that's all right. All right,
It's
thank
pretty
you,
good,
man.
high and dry too.
We'll
We can
talk
go
next
through
week.
all of them. I will talk to you later.
Love it.
Thanks.
You're the best. Bye-bye.
Charch, everybody, every Thursday. Follow him on X, on Twitter, at Paul Charchian. You know, the Kyler Murray thing, he'll probably get other opportunities, Max. There's no doubt.
Yeah.
Because he is a playmaker. Like, he has games in which you're like, wow. But there's just something, there's a vibe about him that's just different from the Baker Mayfields and from the Geno Smiths and Sam Darnolds.
I think it's a lack of, like, he doesn't outwardly love football like I know.
It would appear that way.
Like I know Baker Mayfield does. Like I know Sam Darnold does. Sam Darnold wouldn't have gone through all this crap if he didn't love the sport.
Yeah.
And I don't know if Kyler would do the same, but we'll see.
All right, a potential smell test lean tonight when we come back. At 12, you'll hear Steve Suter's film breakdown of sort of the overall game, but Jaden in particular sort of responding to the Kurt Warner video. We'll play that for you at noon. All of our NFL talk on this show is presented by Paramount Plus. You can't count on much, but you can always count on Sundays with the NFL on CBS and Paramount Plus. Watch your local NFL game live every Sunday all season long. Visit ParamountPlus.com/NFL to get started today. So tomorrow, there will be several, if not more than several, Several means, I think, more than 3. A pair is 2, a few is 3, several is more than 3. I think that's right.
I've heard a few is 3 to 5. Anything more than that is several.
Okay. Tommy and I did a whole thing on this on the podcast, and we looked it up, and now I'm forgetting what it was. I do know that a pair is 2. I believe a few is 3, but whatever. They're going to be more than 3, I promise you, smell test picks, because I think the board sets up for some clarity this weekend. And last weekend, I didn't think there was clarity, and I went 9-1, 70, 41, and 6 on the season. That is 63% on the year. Yeah, I'm waiting for that correction, and I wouldn't jump on everything I say from now on because maybe the damage to the books has already been done. Somebody asked me the other day, you said you've been limited before. I have been limited, but never on football. Never. Nobody really gets limited football-wise. It's the lines are so tight. College basketball, over the years, yes, I have had books put limits on me for college hoops. And we've never done that as a smell test thing, but that's always been my best betting thing, college hoops. Although that's getting harder and harder now. Anyway, I would lean Vegas tonight. It's not an official play, but the world's on Denver tonight. The line's 10. We've seen, some 9.5s out there, but I think you can get 10 right now if you look hard enough. Yeah, I'm looking at the updates. I'm seeing some 9s and 9.5s. Maybe you can't get 10 right now. You could this morning. So there's some sharp money on Vegas. Short week, these Thursday night games, divisional matchups, familiarity, all that stuff. I'd also lean a little bit under 43 in this one, but neither one of the picks is. I'm going to play them. I'm going to play Vegas in the under. The game's on TV. Why not? And it's not that I'm, flipping a coin on this one. I do feel comfortable with both plays, but not official. Vegas played their hearts out. Vegas played their little cute hearts out Sunday against Jacksonville. They went for the 2 in overtime. Why wouldn't you? There were 16 seconds left. It's not like with 16 seconds left, if you kick the extra point, you're going to get the ball back. So they went for the true win on a 2-point conversion. If they had succeeded, the game would not have been over if people. Well, yeah, no, the game would have been over. Yeah, that was the second possession. My fault. Yeah, it would have been over. They went for the 2. They didn't get it, and they lost 30-29 to Jacksonville. Can the Raiders play 2, good games in a row? I don't know, but Vegas certainly believes that they've got a fighting chance, and they'll need the Raiders tonight. There are also a couple of college games that nearly, I kind of like Georgia Southern tonight, getting 5 against App State. And I like UTSA getting less than 2 touchdowns. I'd buy it to 14 against USF. But again, those are just games I'm going to play. I'm not giving them out for my official smell test picks. I will have a college game for sure tomorrow night, if not 2 college games to kick off the weekend. All right, when we come back, you're going to hear Steve Suter's film breakdown. Some of it, I picked out about 25 minutes. We'll play it in 2 segments of what I thought was most important. He gave kind of an overview of the game, but then he got into Jaden, and I actually told him about the Kurt Warner thing, so you'll hear his response to that as well. That's next. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com.
And instead, again, we're spending a lot of time creating. And yep, I mean, I played quarterback. Yes, there's times where you're getting hit a lot, getting a lot of pressure, you get impatient, you stop seeing the field and you start looking to create. It happens. That was my point, is he's not seeing the field and playing as patiently as he did a year ago. Here comes the throw. It's coming. Okay, we can always give him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he doesn't feel this guy coming out because this guy chipped, and maybe he didn't think it was ever going to come, and that's why he took off. Okay, I can live with that. If that's the reason, I don't get a chance to talk to Jaden, but if that's the reason, I can live with that.
That was Kurt Warner, part of his, viral within our community film analysis of Jaden's game against Seattle on Sunday night. My guy, Steve Suter, comes on my podcast every Wednesday to break down the film of the game. And you're going to hear what he said about Jaden's performance. Steve, for those of you who don't know, Steve is one of the greatest punt returners in the history of college football, held every ACC punt return record when he left Maryland in 2004, and had many NCAA records at the time. And he's been great breaking down film. He's a huge football nerd. He's coached before. And he's been great. I mean, he's been, for a lot of you, Cooley number 2. Cooley's the GOAT. I'm not taking anything away from Cooley, but Steve's been outstanding and really, really blunt, in his assessment, and very detail-oriented in all of it. So there are 2, segments from the podcast that I'm going to play for you. This first is just an overview of Sunday night and why it happened, and you're going to hear some Jaden analysis involved. And then the second part I'm going to play for you is more specific to Jaden Daniels and him answering kind of Kurt Warner's overall thoughts. So I started off with Steve on yesterday's pod, asking him for just a reaction overall to the game on Sunday night.
Certainly a rough one to watch. I was watching most of it live, but then going into the All-22, got worse. If Seattle plays Washington 10 times, they beat them 10 times. That was what I got out of that. Just a much better team on both sides of the ball, better prepared on both sides of the ball, and I think have better playmakers and skill positions where necessary on both sides of the ball. So really rough, maybe, level check for Washington there from watching Seattle perform. And overall takeaway, if I'm looking at Seattle, Sam Darnold looked amazing. His timing was incredible. His accuracy was incredible. His knowledge pre-snap was right on point with his post-snap confirmation. So I was really impressed with him from a standpoint of a quarterback that's been a journeyman. I know he played well last year. Shocking to see the Vikings let him pass after what I watched. Defensively, really sound in the back end. Seattle was much more so than Washington has been all season. So you can tell they're better coached or just have smarter players in the secondary. And then overall, from the standpoint on both sides of the ball from Washington, I'll start with defense. I was pretty disappointed just from the personnel decision in the beginning. You don't have Jacob Martin in the game to start the game. I don't get it. He's in my opinion, your top 3 of best players on your defense now that you sustained those injuries. And he had a great game against the Chiefs, and he's tough against the run. And so what I think they thought they were doing is going big against Seattle to try to stop the run with Jalen Holmes at DN, or they put Kindle on DN.
You said something. I just want to be clear. You were disappointed that Jacob Martin wasn't in the game to start.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Correct.
It sounded like you said was in the game. Yeah. Go. That's fine. Go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, it wasn't. I think it's a coaching mistake. They think they're going big on big, and they want more weight on the outside to help set edge and stop the run game. But that's not how you have to stop the run. You want somebody that wants to stop the run and wants to play hard and wants to set the edge. And so I was very disappointed. You saw Seattle attack the edges in their first possession. They ran a sweep, and Jalen Holmes can't set the edge. They get outside. They get a good gain. Then they come back for a jet sweep to JSN. They can't set the edge again. He gets around the outside. Then they go back to Jalen again. They can't set the edge. And every time I'm watching, I'm like, why is Jacob Martin not the guy there? And I just think that's flawed from the beginning. Then, well, we'll get into it specifically. I'll show you the play. They start, man, I can't wait to show you this play. You know what? Let's just go to it. Do you mind? Let's go to it.
That's fine.
Watch it. Since I'm on my rant right here, right? Let's go to the first play coming out of halftime. So go third quarter, 14:55. Martin starts coming out of halftime, all right? Didn't start him in the beginning game. He started him at halftime. And they run a sweep right at him. and watch this guy just annihilate the tight end to set this edge and blow this whole play up. And so this is what I don't get.
Yeah.
Why don't you start with him? Why don't you start with him there? Well, you think he can do it? Look, he showed. Now, the reaction of Martin, he's yelling at Washington sideline, and I'm not going to put words in his mouth, but in my opinion, he's saying, that's why you can start me, dude. That's why I can do this. You see that? Watch that.
Yeah, I see him get up and
Watch his
yeah.
reaction. That is going right at the sideline. So to me, again, I'm making some assumptions here, but this is him being angry that they didn't start him and told him they were going to start him because they wanted a bigger body to set the edge. And he blows up the play, and he is yelling back at his sideline, saying, I told you so, essentially. So I think he's on the same page I am. I don't understand that coaching decision at all, really. So we kind of got into specific there. But my overall thoughts are just outmatched Washington was both sides. Well, obviously, personnel plays a big issue here. You don't have anybody playing. Everybody's hurt. You just have personnel problems. Zach Ertz is basically a retired tight end who's starting for you. You got two retired players on defense in Von Miller and Preston Smith when they come in. I mean, you got retired guys playing.
They're retired, but they're playing. They're retired.
Yeah,
so you think in their own mind they're done.
Well, in their own mind or just quality of play.
Yeah.
You just got to be able to. There's got to be better players out there that you can put on the field that can give you some spotty production. When you put Preston Smith in, you're just chalking up a play. I don't know. I would, if I was a defense, I'd call an audible. An offense, I'd call an audible and run right at him, or I'd call a deep pass because I'm not worried about pass rush. Von Miller too. I can't remember last time I've seen him actually, make a pressure that's significant in the ball game. So you got no bodies, and I'm not sure. I think we kind of touched on it last week. What you can do about it?
Yeah.
I'm stunned that they didn't make a move, but maybe they didn't have any way to make a move. I would have tried to move Payne. He's one of your biggest names, I guess, still on defense.
Yeah.
He's been one of the most disappointing performers for me all season. He's had 2 good games. The rest, I get angry watching him. I would have tried to move him for a 4th-round pick, something. That's what I would have done from a roster perspective. I don't know. I'm not in the war room with the GM.
Right. Yeah, I think people are surprised that they didn't. Yeah, I think people are surprised that they didn't make any moves. I mean, for all we know, they tried, and the offers back were just not worth taking. But yeah, I mean, Deron Payne and guys like Wiley and Allegretti on offense, veteran guys that can step into it. Yeah, but they didn't move anybody.
They didn't move anybody. So they just didn't have a chance to win this game at all. It was too blatantly obvious. They're just outmatched. And the scheme too, right? So let's go offense. They can't get anybody open. And then if they do, it's rare, maybe 3 or 4 plays, really, of all the snaps I'm watching offensively when Jaden's trying to drop back and pass, that he's had an option to throw a solid football to. They got a lot of cover 3. Seahawks showed a lot of cover 4 shell and cover 2 shell beginning, mostly rolled into cover 3 for the most part. That has to be their MO. I haven't watched their games. I haven't scouted them. You would imagine Washington did. I would have a bunch of cover 3 beaters in there. Bring in zone pressure. You got to be able to see this. You got to be able to scout it and have plays to try to take advantage of. But Jaden just doesn't have that option. And I'm getting worried that he is going to have just some mental blocks getting thrown out every game, every possession with receivers that can't get open, play schemes that aren't taking advantage of the defense in front of him, so he doesn't have options and he has to start scrambling. That was evident to me watching the game. So he had 10 carries at the end of the game, only one of which was a called run, and that was the 1-yard touchdown. So that's 9 scrambles. Even the play he got hurt on, it's an RPO. He's trying to get it to Debo, hopefully, but the guy's in his face, so then he has to tuck the ball and run. But that was an RPO that he had a chance to throw the football and still had to scramble. So he's got 8 scrambles in the game, and that's because nobody's open. And that is concerning. And I'm making notes as the game's going on. Meanwhile, I was watching it live, and I don't want to toot my own horn here. I know everybody's after the fact getting on Dan Quinn because he left him in, and rightfully so. It's inexcusable, and I don't want to pile on to that. But I texted Swope, our mutual friend, in the second quarter, once it was 28-zip. And my comment with him was, Dan doesn't have the kahunas, but I would pull out all my premium players right now. Second quarter, 28-0. I'm calling a game. And there's just no reason to get anybody else hurt. You're not coming back. You're outmatched here. Now, is that wrong to just point out Dan? Probably, because no coach is going to do that. Nobody has the stones in the league to make that type of call. And I get it. People come out to the game, they spend their money. They want to see Jalen play. You can't pull him in the second quarter. But if you're thinking outside the box, I would have done that. There's just no reason to put him through it. And it's because up until that point in the second quarter, he's had 6 unscheduled runs. And you got to say to yourself, okay, every time we drop back to pass, we're putting him in danger because nobody's open. And the only way we're going to move the ball is if he uses his feet. That's just a recipe for getting hurt. So those things are just adding up. There's several times I wrote, why aren't you taking him out now? Why don't you take him out now? In the third quarter, why aren't you taking him out? So I'm sure you've been, beating that dead horse on your podcast with people chiming in on their thoughts. All game, when you drop Jaden back, it turned into a run.
Exactly.
So first quarter, every drop back turns into a scramble. Second quarter, every drop back basically turns into a scramble. Nothing changed. Every time they drop back to pass, it is a scramble situation because that conceptually from the route scheme, they're not getting anybody open. And then if it's man coverage or you need a receiver to win, that's not happening. So I don't know what you want him to do back there. And it worries me that he's going to take a mental step backwards from a trust standpoint of not trusting the play, getting called into the huddle, not trusting his receivers to get open. So all he's expecting to do is drop back and say, all right, I got to make it happen. I got to ad lib here, do a little sandlot. And that could have a compounding effect on him in the future if he doesn't get that trust back and settle down in the offense in the pocket moving forward when they correct these things, when they get players that can make plays outside, and when they call competent game plans that get people open based off of scheme. And it's all just added up to you just don't have people to throw to. If people aren't open. I mean, you did on that first possession, he had a big chunk play. If you go to 13:02, right, first quarter, you're talking about the first drive. Could he, right off of this play action boot, step up into the pocket and he's going to have a big chunk? But he drifts out. Hard to say if he drifts out too wide on this.
Oh, is this the one debates on the sideline that almost gets picked?
No, yeah. But he has Chris Moore, and he's going to have Ben butt naked here. Like he's going to take 20, 25 yards if he had to step up sooner. But Lawrence is there. Like you see, nobody's covering Ben, nobody's covering Chris Moore.
But there's immediate pressure.
Right. Yeah. So my point being, is this a Jaden technique flaw where he needs to be ready to step up in the pocket quicker? Like he could scoot up, he could plant his foot as soon as he comes off that play fake, step up, and then he'd have time to deliver that football. But I didn't dig him for this because of that. Lawrence is playing it pretty good, and he's coming and attacking hard. So but like this play you're watching here is your biggest almost pass play of the entire game right here. Nobody the rest of the game has anywhere of the open area that Moore and Ben here have on this play. And you can't even get to it because of Lawrence playing it on the play action. Jaden never gets to see a guy this like this open.
I see what you're looking at. It's funny because so Kurt Warner did this film breakdown and essentially came to the conclusion that Jaden's regressed from last year. He was very positive. He's like, Jaden's done all these things, and this was one of the plays he pointed to. And I know what you're saying right now, right? It's an under center, which they ran a couple of under center bootlegs, by the way, without really running the football, but that's all right. And he comes out, and what you're saying, rather than the typical boot with the pressure by DeMarcus Lawrence, where he gets to the edge and he looks for the underneath player, which is going to be what? Is that Bates? Immediately, he's got Sinnott running absolutely against cover 3 in the clear, and he's got to, rather than take that full bootleg, that naked bootleg out on the edge, he's got to stop, plant, and throw it right away.
Yeah, well, not even right away. Like if you're watching it from the end zone, are you watching it from the end zone?
I'm watching. Yeah, I'll watch it from the end zone.
Yeah. So just as soon as he turns around off the play action, right?
Right.
And like his second step could be a plant step, and then he could just shuffle up in the pocket and wait for his center to come open.
Right.
Or he's still got Chris Moore coming across his body wide open.
Yeah.
I mean, you take your pick there. So I don't know the play design here, obviously. Are they expecting Lawrence to follow this run a lot more and that he thinks the end's going to be crashing. So he is getting width off of his bootleg, because he's going to think he's going around Lawrence. But Lawrence doesn't care at all about the play action here. He's not invested in the run, not one bit.
Right.
So when he just starts his rush, he's cutting off that ability to waggle out there. So it's hard to say when they draw this up on tape or they've watched this on tape before, maybe this play's worked and Lawrence has crashed. And then he thinks he needs to get width and get around him. Maybe that's the case. But when he comes off the line of scrimmage, off the play fake, if he plants his foot, steps up, then he's going to have the biggest play of the day.
So that was Steve Suter, kind of the overall game, but he gets into Jaden there at the end. There's more, though, from him on Jaden Daniels. And look, you can hear that he thinks a lot of it is that there just isn't an opportunity, but he does identify some of the plays, and there's some of the exact plays that Kurt Warner identified. But he had interesting reasons for perhaps some of the plays not working, and you're going to hear that when we come back. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the Team980.com. I got this from Ben in Reston. Ben writes, more Steve Suter, please. Absolutely love him. Had never heard of him. And then he writes parenthetically, not a Maryland follower. How about more about him, Kevin? Yeah, I mean, again, Steve's one of the greatest punt returners in NCAA history. When he left Maryland in 2004, he owned every ACC record, punt return for touchdowns. He had 6 in his career, punt return yards, punt return totals. NCAA, I think he's still like top 3 all time in career punt returns for touchdowns. Steve's told me the story before, but he never had one fair catch of a football. And part of it was because Brian Mitchell was his guy. He was a big Skins fan back then. B. Mitch was his guy. He never fair caught a ball. I think the quote was, I don't need to fair catch. If I can catch it and fall down 2 yards, that's 2 yards worth it for my team. He ran like a 4.340 in his workouts before the NFL draft. Washington brought him in for a tryout, but he had 4 knee surgeries, and ultimately that cost him his shot at the NFL. He was in the CFL for a while, and then had injuries that ended his career. But he was super fast. I mean, lightning fast. They ran him on, reverses and bubble screens. Ralph Friesian did in those early years. He was an absolute have to game plan for factor in every game he played. All right. So the second part of his film breakdown, specific to really Jayden only, I told him, I said, Kurt Warner did this film analysis. This is what he kind of said that Jayden had kind of regressed, that he didn't see why, he was so great last year, but this year he's not seeing it. He used like 5 plays from the Seattle game. And so Steve kind of responded with his own breakdown of Jayden's game Sunday night against the Seahawks.
Interesting point. Now, I don't have context of watching Jayden all of last year, so I don't have tape to compare to say whether there is a regression, in my opinion, or not. I will say, from watching the Seattle game, maybe there's a handful of plays that maybe he could have performed better, but other than that, he just doesn't have the personnel, and play calls are not there. I have 3. Let's see. I got 1, 2, 3 plays that maybe he could have delivered a football when he didn't, and that's it. And it starts on the first play. Let's look at the first play.
The first play, 14:55. Yep.
Yeah, first play of the game. So if you're telling me he's not reading this right, I could say, okay, maybe you're right. This is a pre-snap cover 2, maybe 2-man. That's how I would read it, right? He got press corners here, 2 deep safeties, clear cover 2, unless they do something for the snap of the ball. They don't. So you do have a clear out route going at that far safety, and you have Debo running a corner in between, and you got a flat route. So you're flooding a cover 2 zone there with this play action. This is a good play call against this coverage. But I'll tell you what, Debo breaks his route at 8 yards. I know he shouldn't do that in cover 2. He's got to get at least to 10. So you provide some type of separation from that corner and the flat route. Otherwise, the picture is going to be too tight for Jayden to see. So he's not getting to his depth. And then the guy is at who is that? That's
Lane
7 there. Oh yeah, the DN, right?
Number 7. He's really the guy Nwosu. He's really good.
Yeah. So if you want to step up here, I mean he's got to plant his foot in the ground, ignore this DN barreling down on him, and then maybe he can deliver this ball to Debo. That's a maybe, but it's going to have to be anticipating it. I just don't see the time to get that separation. By the time if he was going to throw this ball without getting sacked, I'm like clicking on my mouse right when he would have to throw it. And Debo's kind of open, kind of. The corner still hasn't made his mind up yet if he's going to take the flat or he's going to sink on Debo. So that's a borderline play.
This is one of Warner's plays. This is one of his plays.
Yeah, I can't agree with that. If you're going to say this is a regression play when he's got a DN coming down in his face, I don't see regression here. So I would disagree with that. That's the disagreement.
And you say Debo runs the route too shallow?
I'm assuming he would. If this is you're flooding this, you want a flat route, you want to high-low this corner. Okay, with Zach Ertz and Debo, you're getting what you want. You get cover 2. You get Chris Moore running straight at the safety to keep him deep. And then you need to high-low the corner with Ertz and Debo. Well, they're not doing a great job of that because I think Debo breaks it short. But even if Debo goes to 10 yards, now the DN's even closer to Jaden. So it's just not going to work from a timing perspective.
Okay.
So I don't know what they thought pre-snap in their pre-game analysis that they thought these DNs would be more aggressive on these play-action boots, but they weren't all game. They did it to the other side, and DeMarcus Lawrence plays it well. They slow play these things, and then they just attack Jaden. So I don't see anything wrong with this play.
Okay.
He would have to anticipate, come right off the play fake and turn and square up and have no boot at all. Like no boot action. Just turn and square up as soon as you do it and sit in the pocket.
All right. So
maybe that's a fundamental flaw that he's not supposed to be rolling out after the play fake and he's supposed to be staying in the middle of the.
On the other one you showed, that was a true boot where you're always, rolling rather than setting up, right? I don't know.
Kurt doesn't know that either. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not putting this blame on Jaden. Sure. Maybe he could have made that play, but that's not on Jaden.
So this was one of the 3 that you said, is debatable as to whether or not he could have fired it. Okay.
So, and I'll say this too. Let's go to 12:55. Right, in the second quarter. Let's go to his pick. Let's go to his interception.
Yep.
So the stuff that I'm worried about here, it's not post-snap at all. It's pre-snap because they set themselves up for failure here. I know it's 3rd and 17, but they're running all 17-yard routes. So they're anticipating, A, not to get pressure here because you can't run a 17-yard curl with pressure, or they're identifying the pressure wrong in the beginning, which they do. They slide the line left here.
Yeah.
Pre-snap, they think pressure's coming from the left. So they mark 13 as the Mike here. That's evident, which is Ernest Jones, but he doesn't blitz. He drops out, and so does DeMarcus Lawrence. They both drop. And the blitz actually comes up top from the corner. Now, pre-snap, I wouldn't think that corner up there is blitzing, who's pressing on lane either, because the safety behind him is pretty deep. And so that doesn't appear like a corner blitz pre-snap look. But do the Seahawks show this on tape and they're not prepared for it and they should have slid the line to the right instead of to the left? Because if they slide it right, they're picked up and then they can run these 17-yard routes. But Seattle drops into a zone blitz, cover 4. They got everything covered, and you don't have any time to run 17-yard curl routes unless you think you're picking up the protection. So this is a pre-snap issue. So I'm not sure if Jaden's responsible for calling the mic here, and he's the one that plants the protection, or it's Biotic, because sometimes the centers do it. But they can't win this play. This play is toast. This should be max protection if you're running these deep of routes, and you got to get the protection right. You got to call it right. But they don't. So, there's no chance for this. Now, Jaden's trying to throw this ball away. He's not trying to complete this curl to a corner that's already running the curl route 4 lane.
Right. He
just can't get enough into it, and the guy makes the pick. But that was set up from the beginning. Like, you lost the play before the play started. Now, is that on Jaden? I don't know. I got to be in the huddle. I got to understand the protection that they're calling, that Kingsbury's calling in, and who's responsible for pointing to the mic, and that sort of thing. So that's a tough one. That's a good play by Seattle, right? It's a good disguise. You wouldn't think that corner on top is blitzing, and he does, so you get caught off guard. So Jaden's toast here. I mean, he has nothing. There is no outlet. There is no hot route. There's no sight adjust. And that also makes me think that they didn't anticipate blitz here. Maybe Seattle shows a tendency on 3rd and long, that they drop, maybe only rush 3 and drop 7. That's what they do. And they tricked them here. So he calls the plays and roll the dice that we're not going to get pressure. We're only going to get a 3-man rush. And I'm going to have a chance to maybe complete a 15-yard comeback. But they get fooled. So that's either starts from the coaching play call. He's looking at his sheet. He's saying, oh, look at this. 3rd and 15 plus, Seattle 23% of the time only rushes 3 or whatever his number is. And then he's got a play call for it. So he dials it up, calls it in, and he gets tricked. That's where I would start. And if the play comes in and where it's an option and Jaden has it, maybe King says, hey, alert pressure here from whichever side, and they don't call the right side, then that's on Jaden or that's on Biotic. Go to 7:54. This is the 3rd down to Ertz. So now look, my first note of this is Washington could never run this defense. That was my first note in my notes. From a secondary perspective, The communication of Seattle is perfect. Okay, so now Debo comes in motion. Now, do you watch the corners? They don't even talk to each other here when Debo comes in motion. They already know how their responsibility changed. And now what they're going to do is they're playing 4 over 3. Okay, so you're going to get a safety, you're going to get these 2 corners, and you're going to get the linebacker is going to come over and wall them off too. So it's 4 Seattle defenders that are going to cover 3 Washington guys. But Seattle doesn't communicate after the motion. They communicate 3 yards into the play, okay? 3 yards into the play, you see Devin Witherspoon, 21. He's yelling over to the safety, and I can't determine who it is, telling him, you're getting Debo. He already sees Zach Ertz's out route, and that's the pass off. So not only did they not communicate in the beginning because they knew what they were doing, then during the route, they're able to successfully pass off 2 receivers, and then Witherspoon breaks on Ertz to stop him to get the first down. So I dinged Jaden a little bit here, but I can understand how you can't read this. You got 4 over 3. There's so many ways that Seattle could play this. They could play a hard corner here that would kill Ertz. They could play the banjo like they're doing now. They could play straight man coverage and not switch. So Jaden needs to read this on the fly, which is extremely hard to do because, again, they got 4 over 3, and they can mix this up. So what they do is they end up giving up the Ertz 4 or 5 yard out, and Jaden's called a quarter of a second late in delivering it. If he's a quarter second faster, Ertz has it in his hands, and he can probably take that contact and get a yard up and get the first down.
Yep.
I mean, that's a tough play to read, dude. And Seattle's playing it perfect. Communication's perfect. They pass off the guys perfect. Witherspoon's really aggressive once he knows his guy's picking up Debo to break on this football. And all right, big deal. In their head, they want to go off the field for sure, but if they give up the 5 yard out, they give up the 5 yard out. And they didn't give up a blown coverage Debo 30-yard corner route. So good job by them. Now go 11:44.
Okay.
11:44, third quarter. And so this is the one where I wrote down, and in my notes it says, I'm worried now that this stuff is getting to his head because he has Lane here early. This is pitch and catch. And Seattle's been showing this. I think we already touched on it. Cover 4, cover 2 shell pre-snap, and then roll into cover 3. They do the same thing here. Well, if you roll to cover 3, your corners aren't responsible for the flat. That's coming from inside the box, the linebackers. So he has Lane right away. If you just take it, 5 yard out, you're 2nd and 6, you're going to get the first down. That should be catch, hit, and throw. As soon as he sees that safety on his left come downhill, or it doesn't look like he's looking at it, and he even like pump fakes it.
Yeah.
So
what is he pump faking for? He pumps it to Jalen Lane, doesn't throw it.
And I think he thinks it's going to open Debo back up. Or he's pumping the Ertz. He's either pumping the Ertz or he's pumping the Lane. And I think he's moving the middle linebacker there, Tyrese Knight, and then he's going to snap back and hit Debo, which he still could have. So I dinged him on this because you either take Lane right away and get the first down, or if your mentality was to maneuver that middle linebacker Knight off his line so you can come back to Debo, then come back to Debo. And he doesn't do either. And then he ends up having to scramble. So this was the play. So now you've gone 2.5, we'll call it 2.5 quarters of nobody being open. Your play's not working, and you have to scramble. You don't trust anything that's going on. And then this is where it piles up to this play right here where I go, oh, no. He might be in trouble mentally in the pocket.
Yeah, so good stuff from Steve. And there was so much more. And I'll just give you one sort of hint if you want to go listen to the rest of it on the podcast. There's no doubt that he had a big problem with the game plan and the readiness of them offensively. He already expects it defensively week in and week out that they're going to be mismatched and perhaps even outwitted. No pun intended. But he definitely had an issue with the scheme and the play calling and the readiness for what Seattle presented. Pointing a big finger at Kingsbury for that particular night. Anyway, I thought you guys would want to hear some of that. All right, when we come back, speaking of Kingsbury, he has spoken. Joe Witt Jr. has spoken. You're going to hear some of that when we return. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the Team980.com.
All right, it is Thursday, November 6th, and some national news that ESPN Bet is no more. The sports news empire ended their agreement with Penn National Gaming just 2 years into their 10-year, $2 billion deal. The ESPN Bet app will be shut down next month with 8 years remaining on the gambling mega deal. The Wizards, with another loss last night, they fall to 1-7 in a 136-107 loss to Jaylen Brown and his Celtics. Again, Alex Sarr with another night to remember offensively, tying his season high of 31 points with 8 boards and 2 assists. Caps, they get one back in a big way last night, beating up on the St. Louis Blues 6-1. One of those 6 goals was scored by Alex Ovechkin for his 900th career tally. The first player in NHL history to reach 900 goals, without a doubt, the greatest goal scorer of all time. The Caps, they get going again tonight, this time against the Pittsburgh Penguins. Puck drop at 7:30. Coverage begins over on 106.7 The Fan with John Walton, Ken Sabbert, and Katie Florio at 7:15. This update is sponsored by the Team 980 YouTube page. Just open the app, type in the Team 980, hit subscribe. Kevin Sheehan is live every day from 10 to 1. You can catch Denton's office throughout all of football season. Don't forget to hit the like button whenever you do decide to join us and turn on notifications to stay up to date on all things DC sports. And that is what's trending.
So today was coordinator day out in Ashburn. Cliff Kingsbury spoke. Joe Witt Jr. spoke. We'll start with Cliff because I think there were a lot of questions about the offense on Sunday night and really just the challenges that he's had. The first one we wanted to play for you is just on remaining efficient in the run game despite the injuries. Here's what he said.
Teams kind of keying in on the run game, loading the box. As an offense coordinator, how do you kind of try to fight around that and remain efficient in the run game, even when that's the case?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of getting behind early where you abandon it at some point, around the third quarter, you're trying to catch up, which hasn't helped. And then just trying to find the right matchups, the right personnel groupings, different things to take advantage of, maximize your personnel. We got to do a good job of that. I feel like the guys that we're asking to step up and play have gotten a better feel for the offense at this point and should be able to start making some strides that'll help us, not only in the run game, the pass game as well.
Yeah, the only thing I would say to that is, they weren't behind by 21 during the first 10 in which he called 9 pass plays against Seattle. That's been the case, at times where they've gotten behind. But yeah, I can think of the Green Bay game when I was really, really ticked off that they basically didn't try to run the football at all. Now, that was a game, remember, where they lost Bates early, and that was part of their reasoning why they got away from sticking with the run. Yeah, I don't think that that's necessarily been it. It hasn't been every single time they've gotten away from the run because the score's gotten sideways. This was him talking about, do you think the offense is doing a good job of taking what's there? Here's what he said.
Following up on the run game, do you feel like early in the game when you guys were trying to get it going, is the offense doing a good job of taking what's there, or have you seen guys kind of trying to maybe do a little too much?
I think all of us are pressing a little bit. Yeah, you definitely feel that. We got to take what's blocked. I thought that's one thing C-Rod did a really nice job when he came in. We got to take what's blocked, and then the big plays will come. But I think as an entire offense, we're pressing, and we've got to just make the routine plays and allow those big plays to happen.
That was interesting with Rodriguez. I hadn't heard that. I didn't know that was part of the answer. I wonder if that is going to be the move on Sunday, if we're going to see Rodriguez early and Bill after Rodriguez. This was Kingsbury on the things that need to happen to get the offense where he wants it to be.
Hi, Coach. Coach Witt talked a little bit about changing some things up, trying to do different things to try to get that side of the ball going. So in getting the offensive side of the ball going the way you want it to go, what are some of the things that need to happen as you face Detroit this week?
Yeah, we got to finish drives, continue to hurt ourselves in critical moments, whether it's a third down that we convert, get called back, fourth down we convert, get called back. The turnovers keep haunting us. So I think those are areas that keep showing up week in and week out. And it's, I think it starts at practice, obviously. So we're trying to tighten some things up there and making sure that the accountability is there in practice when we're repping, treating it like a game, and making sure that when those situations arise in practice that, it's a game mentality.
There's no doubt that some of what he said there is true. It's not like they're getting out there and can't move the football. Washington is like 12th in yards per play. They're like, close to 10th in yards per drive. But what's happening is they're killing themselves in these games. Kansas City, 5 of the first 6 drives go into Kansas City territory. They end up with 7 points. Why? Well, Debo drops a pass. They've got penalties. They've got other drops. They've got, they're killing themselves. Sunday night, look, they were never going to win that game. Part of the last 2 weeks, let's be fair, they have played 2 much better football teams, period. Much better football teams. 2 teams that, a lot of people will have here at midseason in the Super Bowl, Kansas City against Seattle. But first down on the opening drive, penalty, 15-yard. not 5, 15. So now you're in second in 25. Against Seattle, you might as well punt then. Second drive, they've made 2 first downs. They're at the Seattle 40-yard line. And here comes another 15-yarder on Chris Paul. Now you're in, 3rd and 17. 3rd and 17 against that team, especially what Suter described, where they missed, the whole pre-snap thing. The play was basically toast from the beginning. They're trying to pick up 17 yards on 3rd and 17, running 3 guys to the sticks where they can't protect. And they're not planned to protect. And then you get this big run, would have been the biggest run of the game. Jaden on 4th and 1 from their own 29. That's a 15 to 20-yard play the way it's setting up. And you got Ertz out there who, one of his 2 false start penalties. You can't keep doing that. They did it in the Dallas game with drops, with penalties, eventually with turnovers. They did it with, against Chicago, obviously, with the turnovers. They have to be perfect offensively. There is no doubt that right now they are so bad on defense. They literally have no prayer on defense, and then unless the other team self-destructs, all right, which sometimes happens in this league. Washington has done it a little bit offensively. Other teams could do it and reciprocate. That would be nice. But because you pretty much can guarantee you're not getting the ball back for a while, and when you get it back, you're going to be down another 7 or another 3. You have to be perfect on offense. There's no room for error, and they've continued over these last 4 games in particular to make one error after another. Look, they made some errors in the Charger game that they won. They had 8 penalties in that game. Remember, they had the Bill fumble at midfield. They had a couple of drops in that game too. Ertz had a big drop before they punted and then got the roughing the punter. They were able to overcome that. But for the most part, they have to be perfect. More Cliff Kingsbury, the challenge of all of these new guys because of injuries coming into the locker room and needing to play. Here's what he said.
As a coach, when you're dealing with so many new receivers coming in, what's sort of the challenge of getting them up to speed, even when they're new in season, and making sure it's cohesive?
Yeah, I think just building a rapport with the quarterback and getting the amount of reps you'd like to get. That's hard this time of year when you have some injuries and you're tapering back some of the reps. It's just hard to get time on task together. So that's the biggest thing. The guys have come in and done a good job studying, working hard, extra meetings, all that. It's just getting the timing down on the field, full speed, not a ton of reps to go.
I know Jaden's obviously out right now, but
yeah, that's the next one we wanted to play. I think Keim's next question. But these are, I love some of you, Ian, that say stop talking about injuries as if like they haven't happened and they haven't had an impact. Literally, this would have to be either your first football season of watching NFL football, or you're just numb. If you don't understand the impact of the injuries this season on this team's overall performance. Mind-boggling, because so many of you who have responded with this, you've watched a lot of football. You know that this wrecks teams year in and year out. This was him, though, on the effect of the quarterback, Jaden Daniels, missing games on the offensive inconsistencies.
I know Jaden's obviously out right now, but what effect did you see on him missing a couple games, coming back, missing another game, missing that time, and then not having a lot of guys? What kind of effect did you even see last week on him?
Yeah, I think when you haven't practiced a ton with a certain group of guys, you're always going to, there's going to be some trust. You're trying to figure things out kind of in game. And that's always tough to kind of solve that when you're playing against a really good defense. But I thought he battled like he always does, made a bunch of plays for us, kept us in. We just weren't able to convert when we needed to.
Look, most of what they got the other night was him, with his legs primarily. Lastly, there's another one from Cliff. What's the other one you wanted me to play?
Single
Max.
high coverage.
Single high coverage impacted the pass game. There was a lot of, cover 2 rolling into cover 3 with that single high. What did he say to that?
How much has it impacted the pass game with the amount of single high coverages, the more man coverage? how has it impacted what you guys want to do, and how do you adjust with that?
Yeah, you got to be able to try and take advantage of your matchups when you can, when they are going to go single high and play man coverage. And so far, we haven't really been able to attack that or make them pay like you need to if they're going to do that. And so that's something we've been working on, and hopefully we can improve.
Yeah, but by the way, that answer kind of says it all. And I'm telling you, for those that want to start talking about the offseason, they're going to go get some receivers in this offseason. There is no doubt about it. They are going to go try to get guys that can win consistently against man coverage. Again, their top guy hasn't been there. Their number 2 guy may have been dealing with some, issues here the last couple of weeks. Even Noah Brown, not a bad, man coverage guy. Nobody drew more DPIs in the NFL last year than Noah Brown. So yeah, they're going to, and you can say, and it's not unfair to say, well, it was flawed to begin with because Noah Brown got injured last year and you're bringing him back as your number 2. And Terry, you didn't pay, or overpay. And Debo's had a history of injuries. All those things are true. That's certainly a part of it. But they've got to get guys that can win, man coverage wise and can induce a bit of fear. Which do we have a Joe Witt that you want to play for us?
We got a couple Joe Witts. Let's give some of the reasoning.
We got to go because we're 30 seconds here. So play the first one, the quickest one.
Yeah, reason behind moving down from the press box.
Okay.
I know DQ talked about earlier in the week that I will be coming down to the field. I went and asked him to do that for a number of reasons. The first reason I've been in the box, Q, most of the coordinators that I've been around called it from the box. Q, Capers, Mike Pettin. Even when I was in college, the guys, the coordinators always called it from the box. You have a good view. You can see. You don't really have to have as much help with personnel, people coming in and out. So that's why the advantage of being in the box. Moving to the field, I think the energy that I have in practice that can be probably positive within the game for the players. A couple of the guys have been asking for me to come down as well. And so I think it's time for that to happen.
Joe Witt Jr. All right, back tomorrow. Full Football Friday. Chris is next.